In consideration of the COVID-19 social distancing recommendations, this meeting will be held virtually via Zoom. The public may participate with comments by using the chat feature. Please note that all statements are made visible to the entire group. Information has been posted on the website as to how to join this meeting via Zoom. So first off, we have public hearings or public comments. This would be the time if anyone has a comment to share on an item that's not on our agenda tonight. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public presentations, which we do not have any public presentations tonight. So we'll move on to our action items. The first item is the presentation and approval of our 2019 audit. Brian Scott.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We have once again successfully completed another audit of our financial records. This is for the year ending December 31st, 2019. This audit was performed by BT and Company, and this is the third or fourth, I think the third year now that they've been auditing our financial records. And we received an unqualified opinion from them on our financial records. And before I hand it off to them, I just want to give a shout out to Debbie Long, our accounting manager, who played a big part in pulling together all this information for the audit and for really keeping a very tight seal on our financial transactions throughout the year. It's her hard work that really led to the results of this audit, so I want to thank her for that. Stacy Hammond from BT and Company is the managing auditor on this transaction, this record here, as well as Emily Sheldon. They're both with us this evening. So I'm going to hand it off to Stacy and let her present the audit.
Thank you, Brian. Emily and I are pleased to be able to attend your virtual Zoom meeting this evening in order to present the results of the city's annual financial statement audit. I think everyone should have received a couple of documents. One of them is a report to the mayor and city council, and the other document was the city's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended December 31, 2019. The report to the mayor and city council really puts into writing matters that our audit standards require us to present about the results of the city's audit. And that document also forms the basis of my presentation tonight. So if you have that electronically or in paper and want to open that up to follow along this evening, that would be great. The first thing that we need to talk about is our responsibilities in performing the city's audit. If you look at page 1 of that report to the city council, we say that our responsibility is to perform the city's audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and standards set forth in the Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide. Those standards require us to perform procedures in order to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements of the city are free from material misstatement. Our procedures included examining, on a test basis, evidence supporting the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. We also reviewed the city's accounting principles and significant estimates made by management, as well as evaluating the overall financial statement presentation. I am pleased to report that as a result of our audit, we determined that the financial statements of the city are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And therefore, we issued an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best kind of opinion that the city can receive. In the next section of the report, we would bring to your attention anything identified related to changes in accounting policies, newly adopted accounting policies, or any significant or unusual transactions. There is one item in this area to discuss. The city implemented 2 new accounting standards during the year. The first standard, titled GASB Statement Number 84, Fiduciary Activities, resulted in the city changing the name of its agency funds to custodial funds on the report. So that wasn't a very big change. The second standard, titled GASB Statement Number 88, Certain Disclosures Related to Debt, resulted in the city labeling certain debt as direct borrowings in its footnotes, but didn't change anything related to the way that debt is recorded on the financial statements. Moving on to the accounting estimates section of the report, the city does have several significant accounting estimates that are summarized in the Summary of Significant Accounting Estimates chart on page 4. Those estimates are the city's total other post-employment benefits liability, the net pension liability associated with the city's participation in KPERS and KP&F, and the fair value of its investments. Every year, we analyze the process that the city has in place to record these estimates. And as a result of our work, we were able to determine that the city's estimates are reasonable. As discussed in the audit adjustments section of the report, there were several audit adjustments that we recorded to the trial balance that was given to us at the beginning of the audit. Those adjustments are summarized at the very end of this report. These are entries to convert from the cash basis of accounting, which the city operates on throughout the year, to the modified accrual basis of accounting that are required to be reported in the audited financial statements. In the final sections of the report on pages 2 and 3, this is where we would document any concerns or issues that might have come to our attention as a result of any disagreements that we might have had with management, any significant difficulties in performing the audit, or anything of that nature. I'm very pleased to report that we had no disagreements with management during the audit or any significant difficulties. Everyone at the city was extremely cooperative, and they were very transparent in answering the numerous questions that we had throughout the audit process. Finally, in the last 7 or 8 pages of the report to the City Council, there's a letter on the City of Mission's letterhead. It's 7 or 8 pages long and has a bunch of numbered items. We call that management's representation letter. That letter is the final step in the audit process, and it really puts into writing matters that are required by our standards to be represented to us by management. We think it's a good idea for the members of your committee to be able to read and review that letter so that you know what management did represent to us during the audit, and we think that it helps you to fulfill your fiduciary responsibilities as well to look at it. Finally, I would like to thank Brian and his staff for their hard work in preparing for the audit. The city spent a significant amount of time at getting ready for us to come out and do field work, but in order to achieve a good audit result, it's not just a matter of spending time a couple of weeks before we come in to do field work, but the city really has to have good processes and procedures in place year-round in order to achieve an audit where we don't have any deficiencies. So I would like to commend the city for having those policies and procedures in place. And with that, I would open it up to any questions that anyone might have about the annual financial statement audit.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have any questions for Stacy or Emily? And I apologize, I can't see everyone on my screen, so you might just have to call on yourself a little bit. All right. I'm not hearing any questions, so I think that's it. Thank you so much to our outside auditors and to Brian Scott and the rest of staff. And with that, we'll move on to action item number 2 on our agenda tonight. Or sorry, I would entertain a motion on our audit.
I'd like to make a motion to accept.
Yes. All right. Take it to council.
Yes.
And does this need to be a non-consent item, Laura?
Can be consent.
It doesn't need to be, but I would encourage us to put it on the regular agenda, because I think one of the things that absolutely we'll want to highlight is the strong financial position, which sometimes in all of the audit standards and language, as important as those are, Stacy and Emily, and we appreciate that from the layperson's perspective, knowing that we've added to our fund balance and improved our fund balance position, and that some of those other pieces I think are important, and that will give us the opportunity to highlight that.
Okay, so non-consent on that one. Moving on to item number 2, that's acceptance of the April 8th, 2020 Finance and Administration Committee minutes. Audrey McClanahan.
Hi, yes. I submitted the minutes from last month's meeting for your review. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Audrey?
This is Ken Davis. I just want to say thank you, Audrey, for your first set of official minutes.
Thank you very much.
I recommend they be accepted.
All right. Moving on to item number 3, that's our GO refunding bonds, Series 2020A. Brian Scott and Laura Smith.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of given the times of COVID, we're all feeling sort of the trials and tribulations of the situation. And there's a lot of negative with that. This is an area where there's a little bit of a positive with that. We've actually had an opportunity to, the bond market's been changing such that the interest rates have been going down for the last year or so. And we were able to take advantage of that last summer. We issued about $4 million, 3.4 million GO bonds at an interest rate of about 1.73%, which I thought was as unheard of at the time. Given the situation with the coronavirus and the fact that the Federal Reserve has taken their interest rate to just about 0, that's resulted in a little bit more favorable conditions in the bond market today. And so Bruce Kimmel, our financial advisor, presented an opportunity to us recently where we could take advantage of that situation and actually refinance some bonds that are coming up for payment in the next 10 years or so. And those are bonds that were issued back in 2010. It was approximately just a little bit under $7 million of general obligation refunding bonds that were issued at that time. And they were issued to restructure some previous bonds that had been issued back in 2005 and 2009 to address flood mitigation efforts and stormwater infrastructure improvements. The way those bonds, the 2010 series bonds, were structured, the city's been paying interest for the first 10 years in those bonds. This September, we'll actually begin making principal payments on those. And we'll be doing that for the next 10 years. But we have an option with those bonds to actually call them back and issue a new set of bonds at a lower interest rate, which could result in about $600,000 in savings to us over the remainder of the 10 years of the life of those bonds. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Bruce Kimmel's here, and I'm going to let him kind of talk through the particulars of the bond report that's included in your packet. And I believe Kevin Wimpy from Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel, is also on this call or this Zoom meeting, and he can answer some more of the legal aspect questions that you might have. So Bruce, you want to take it from there?
Sure. Thanks, Brian, and thanks, committee members. It's good to be back with you, albeit virtually. So Brian hit most of the high points, but I did want to just touch on a few other points in the pre-sale report that I believe you have in front of you, and it starts on PDF page 199 of your committee packet. And so I won't belabor the purpose of the refinancing much more, just pointing out that the 2010B bonds that are being refinanced kind of have a little bit of a strange structure, and that is because we coordinated this refunding along with the issuance of the 2010A bonds, and they sort of fit together like puzzle pieces. And Brian alluded to part of that, where most of the principal on the 2010B bonds has been deferred for the last 10 years or so while you were paying other stormwater debt. And now that it's about time to start paying significant chunks of the 2010B bonds, we have this great opportunity to refinance at much lower interest rates because the coupons on those bonds, those 2010B bonds, are at 4% and 4.25%, which is quite a bit higher than current market rates. So Brian mentioned the estimated savings of about $600,000. That's on a net or apples to apples basis, comparing your existing debt service to the expected new debt service. And that's equivalent to about, on a net present value basis, that's equivalent to about 9% of the refunded principal. Just for context, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends, as a rule of thumb, that you achieve at least 3% NPV savings with the refunding. So this is about 3 times that. Of course, we might do a little bit better, we might do a little bit worse, but it should be a very strong result for the city when we look to take bids next month. So we talked a fair amount with Laura Smith and Brian Scott also about whether you want to restructure these bonds at all, take this opportunity to either accelerate or decelerate the debt service at all, and taking into account the other bonds that are being paid from stormwater utilities. And at this point, city staff and others recommend that we really mirror the existing debt structure, albeit bring it down with interest cost savings. So sort of take the existing shape of the debt service and then just lower each of those bars by as much as possible, but in a uniform way. You don't expect to have any other debt for city purposes. Oh, I should mention this. Sorry, this is actually a fairly big point. Bank qualification, when we wrote this report, we were taking into account the gateway financing that is anticipated. And since that is anticipated to be more than $10 million, and with this refinancing, I won't go into the ins and outs of federal tax law. And besides, we have Kevin Wempy on the phone, and he can do that if you really want to get into it. But basically, we thought that it was going to be inconvenient, to say the least, to try to issue these bonds as bank qualified. However, we've had some more discussions with bond counsel, both Kevin and Gina at Gilmore Bell, and we believe there might actually be a way to have this bond issue deemed designated bank qualified. I won't go into all of the specifics, but we'll keep working on that. It's not really a material thing, but I wanted to flag it that we are trying to get this designated bank qualified. BQ status simply means that if you have a bank or multiple banks that are the winning bidders, they're more likely to give you a better interest rate, because in addition to the tax exemption on the bonds, they can get another write-off essentially on the interest that they pay on deposits to buy the bonds. You know, that's kind of a mouthful, but we're trying to get this designated BQ if we can without any inconvenience or hassle for the city. So more to come on that. You may recall the city's credit rating is a very excellent AA+. That's only 1 notch below AAA. And that was reviewed with flying colors by S&P last year as part of that bond issuance process that Brian mentioned. We don't anticipate any changes with that. I've been through a number of rating conversations during the pandemic, and there will be questions about how city staff anticipates the pandemic changing city revenues or city expenditures, but it's not, they mostly just want to make sure that you're thinking about it. And I know from talking with Laura and Brian that you are thinking and talking about it often. So I don't anticipate any problems. We just recently had a bond issue for the city of Gardner, and they had some of these questions. And while it took a little bit of thoughtful preparation, it's not like it's a trap or anything like that. So I don't anticipate any problems there. Moving on to the next page. Oh, I should mention this will be a competitive sale, as we have with most of the city's bond issues. This is in compliance with GFOA's best practices, and the city certainly has a great track record of getting very aggressive bids from underwriting firms all over the country. Let me just see if there's anything else that's super material. I won't go into arbitrage unless you really, really want me to. And then I should point out that this is a refunding again. And so one of the reasons we're doing this, in addition to capture interest cost savings, is because city staff has determined that you don't really have available the $6.25 million that you would need to pay off the bonds, right? So if you had that kind of money laying around, of course, it might be preferable just to redeem the bonds in whole, but you do have a stable and pretty reliable funding source for repayment in the stormwater utility, and city staff certainly has a good handle on the obligations on that utility revenue stream. So we think it makes sense to take advantage of the market conditions and lock in better interest rates for the remainder of the bond term. So then finally, just touching on the bond issuance calendar briefly, we're here today for review at Finance and Admin, looking to have City Council approve the authorizing resolution that essentially gives us the green light for the bond issue at your May 20th meeting, and then would be coming back on June 17th to ask for you to award the bonds to the winning bidder. Finally, closing would occur in early July, and a little less than 2 months later, you'd be able to redeem the 2010 B bonds on September 1st. Let me stop there and ask if there's any questions. I can go into some of the details. I guess maybe I should just point out, Madam Chair and committee members, on page 206, PDF page 206, this shows those net to net debt service comparisons. And you can see that we're estimating about $66,000 or so of savings per year for 9 years that accumulate to about $600,000 in total savings. So I'm going to click back so I can see you. I was reading off my screen just now, and welcome any questions that you have.
Do you have any questions for Bruce? Debbie, you're muted.
Yeah.
Councilmember Kring?
Oh, wait.
There you go.
We are.
Am I okay now?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to thank you, Bruce. You bring continuity to the whole process, and it's great having you on board.
Well, thanks, Debbie. I really value this relationship too. So thank you, and we'll look forward to talking again next month.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, I have a question for
Yes.
Bruce.
Councilmember Boultinghouse.
Thanks, Bruce, for this analysis. I had a question that may be a little elementary, but just kind of coming up to speed on this report for the first time in this position.
Sure.
Is it common for bonds in this nature to not have to not be paid interest or to not paid principal on in the first 10 years? Is that something that is done for a particular reason?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would have to go back and into the depths of my archives to figure out exactly all the nuances of how we restructured those bonds from 2005 and 2009.
I can tell you.
Oh, Laura can say that. Laura's got it tattooed.
That's right on my arm. No, I think that the primary reason, so oftentimes, and if you look at the city's debt service policy, our goal, we talk not only about the length of particular debt service issues, but looking to try to keep those as level as possible. Back in, between 2005 and 2007 and 8, we issued a significant amount of stormwater debt for work at both the Gateway and other places throughout the city, leveraging SMAC funds and a variety of other things. When we restructured some of these issues, we took the stormwater issues out longer, for a longer period of time. One, because stormwater infrastructure has a much longer useful life in terms of how long it will be in the ground and how long we expect for it to last. So financing it over a longer period of time is something that is very common with stormwater. But in particular, we looked at arranging this so that not necessarily within each particular debt issue, but overall, the city had a very consistent annual debt service payment that could be anticipated. So we pieced together several debt issues so that there would not be peaks and valleys that councils would need to deal with each year through the annual budget process in trying to accommodate that. So that's why you see some of the kind of different structure in this issue. So overall level, but in an individual issue, there may be some significant differences.
Right, and one other thing I could add is, Laura, if I remember correctly, there were some large lump sum payments that were coming, that would be due on those 2005 and 2009 bonds. And when we originally structured those, the idea was that those could be paid from Gateway Development or in concurrence with the Gateway developing. Really, the city made the decision not to de-hitch its wagon from that horse from a financial perspective, and to really spread those out, like you said, without peaks and valleys and without that reliance. And that has really been a very astute decision to not have that onus of a big lump sum coming due tied to the Gateway. So That's worked out well, and yeah, you're just continuing to follow the plan of paying off these various pieces over time.
Thanks.
And I would just mention that it looks like, I think the last time we did a refunding, so we evaluate these refunding and refinancing opportunities at least once a year in concert with Bruce and the rest of his staff at Ellers, sometimes multiple times throughout the year, depending on what the market may be doing or what issues we have outstanding. But we refunded or did a similar refunding back in 2014 and achieved about $1.5 million of interest savings over the life of those issues. So it's not been insignificant what we've been able to accomplish through the refunding process. And so I think it's really valuable for our community.
Great, thanks both.
Great. Any further questions for Bruce? Seeing none. Brian, was there specific information you wanted Kevin to separately address, or?
I don't believe so. Kevin's prepared the resolution that's before you this evening. That will be on the agenda in a couple of weeks. And that is really simply authorizing staff to proceed with putting together all the necessary documents to take this to the market. Bruce mentioned this, but ultimately we will bring back a package of bid for you all to accept. And so that's your opportunity to kind of finally accept the offer that's made and proceed with the refinancing. You choose to do that. So there's multiple touch points along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have no other comments or questions. I'd entertain a recommendation on this.
Recommend to take it to council, non-consent.
All right.
Yes, and you may recall, just it's been a while, but in the structure of your council meeting agendas, we have issuance of notes and bonds prior to either the consent agenda or the regular committee agendas. And so we will take this matter up really almost immediately at the outset of the meeting.
Okay, great. So moving on, our next action item is the purchase of municipal court software with Brian Scott. I would just remind everyone, since we are on this Zoom call, that if you are a member of the public and you have a question or comment on any particular item, you can use the chat feature within the app. Brian.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We are bringing forth tonight a recommendation to purchase municipal court case management software from Tyler Technologies for a one-time setup fee of $69,753 and then an ongoing maintenance fee of approximately $8,500. The city's municipal court currently uses a software program that's essentially a Microsoft Access database. It was developed about 20 plus years ago by a professor at Johnson County Community College when municipal courts all across the country were kind of struggling with using technology to better manage their caseload and their operations in general. The professor, I believe, has since retired and moved away from the area, so we've kind of lost that support that we had with her. There's not really anybody readily available that can kind of step in and take that on. In addition, the database itself has become very clunky. There's a lot of cases in there, and so it's really starting to bog down the database. We've had numerous cases where the database has actually crashed on us, and so it's kind of on life support, if you will. We did do an update a few years ago before the professor left for retirement. That's helped some, but it hasn't eliminated all the issues with the software. And so it really is time to look for a more stable, more up-to-date software program. And so we began this initiative probably well over a year ago by contacting various vendors, talking with them about their product, actually doing demonstrations of their product. We did some site visits to some other municipal courts in Johnson County that are using Tyler or one of the other applications. And then from there, we kind of put our heads together and developed specifications to put into a request for proposals. And then we submitted that request for proposals this past February. And so we got 5 proposals back, and you can see those on the scoring sheet. We had a selection committee. It was composed of myself, Martha Summerall, our city clerk, Amberly Bard, our court clerk, and Debbie Long, our accounting manager. We read through each of the 5 proposals, and then from there we kind of narrowed it down to 3 that we wanted to pursue further with demonstrations. And so we all gathered one day at City Hall, spread ourselves out in the city console, and then proceeded to watch demonstrations from the 3 different firms that we had selected to follow up with. Really kind of from after those demonstrations, we did some further research, checked references, had some follow-up conversations with the vendors, and then we met again. It really kind of came down to Cassell or Tyler. We thought both were good systems. Tyler is more expensive than Cassell, and you can see that in the scoring sheet. But we really felt that Tyler offered more functionality and kind of ability to carry us into the future. I think of it as you can use technology to help you with work, or you can leverage technology to make your work more efficient. And for us, Tyler seemed to offer that ability to leverage the technology. There were some aspects of Tyler's technology or their software program that Cassell did not offer. A couple of case in points were the ability for a defendant to be able to go online and look at when their court date is, check the status of their court case or their payment plan. Cassell did not offer that. And that's a lot of kind of the day-to-day workload that the court clerks deal with, is phone calls or people coming in. So to have that ability to say, just go online and check, we hope it's going to sort of reduce some of that day-to-day contact that can really sort of slow things down and trying to get work done. Tyler is actually introducing virtual court. It's a new platform for their software. And kind of given this world of COVID today, where we're all spatial distancing and doing things remotely, it's an opportunity where one can actually dial in, much like what we're doing here in a Zoom setting, and meet with the judge, talk about their court case, get a disposition, get all of that handled without ever having to leave their home. So that's something new. They just introduced it in probably the last 6 months. I don't think we're quite ready to go to that platform yet, but I think maybe in a couple of years we can. And by starting with Tyler now on the existing platform, it's an easy transition to that next platform. They also offer some technology where one can come into the courtroom and self-check. So there's no need to stand in line and talk to a court clerk and tell the court clerk you're there and get the file and all of that. Instead, the defendant can come into the courtroom, go to a kiosk, and actually type in their name and then verify information, address, phone number, all the contact information, and then just have a seat. And then the judge sees, okay, well, Mrs. Jones is here now. Let's go ahead and move Mrs. Jones up on the docket here and hear her case. So lots of opportunities like that with Tyler. They also have built kind of a paperless court system, which is something we'd eventually like to go to, where the judge and the prosecutor have a computer sitting at the dais, and they're just looking at the cases directly at that computer, entering in notes, disposition, and electronically that case is being sent to the court clerk for handling of payment, the final transactions to close out that case, without ever having to touch a piece of paper. And so that's something we ultimately like to get to with our court. So those are the advantages that really were appealing for us and Tyler. We think probably worth the extra money. And I think, that kind of summarizes our evaluation in a nutshell. I won't go into a whole lot more depth. I will say the funding, our budget was $35,000 for this. So Tyler's proposal well exceeds that. We do have the opportunity to use some funding from kind of one of the obscure funds that the auditor was talking about. It's the Alcohol Drug Safety Fund. This was a fund that was set up several years ago to kind of deal with evaluation of defendants that were charged with DUI, where they would be sent to a program for alcohol training and substance abuse awareness. And then once they passed that training or passed that counseling, the counselor would send the city a bill for those services, and then we pay out of this fund. And the fund was from charges, court charges, upon that particular case. That has morphed and changed over the years, and we don't really use that system much anymore, if at all. And so funds have been kind of sitting there dormant. There's probably about $23,000 in that fund. We'd like to use $20,000 of that fund towards the acquisition of the software with Tyler. And then that leaves us with a balance of about $14,753 that we can pay for through savings in the general fund. So I believe Amberly Bard, our court clerk, is with us tonight online. And she might be able to answer any more specific questions about our court operation or kind of speak to the recommendation in general. And of course, we can answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any questions for Brian or Amberly from the group?
Yeah, I have one. It looks like we are not looking to go with any kind of cloud-based solution right now. I'm just kind of wondering why.
That was an option that we asked for when making the request for proposals. And the thought was that the cloud-based option would be cheaper. And so the upfront cost it is. If you look at the score sheet, you can see where there's a considerable difference in the initial setup fees. However, it's the ongoing maintenance fees. And when you add up those maintenance fees over about a course of 4 to 5 years, the overall program starts to become more than the on-premise solution.
Yeah, but what are we going to do to maintain the server equipment and everything if there's any issues with that? And make sure that we're able to keep everything upgraded. I mean, we don't have an internal IT department. Just wonder if that's been...
Yeah, we would be updating the server irregardless if we had software in there or not, because we have other applications, and it's all part of those services we have with Johnson County DTI.
Okay.
Brian, I did have a couple of questions. One is about, do we have any concerns about our court population and the move towards an online platform? It sounds like it won't be all paperless to start, but I just wondered if we've thought that through or...
No, it won't be all paperless to start with. That's something we'll evolve into the next couple of years. I don't think you'll ever move to a completely virtual environment. That might be an option where you have a virtual court, then a quote-unquote regular court for those that don't have access to a computer or that technology can still come in and see a judge and have their case tried. So.
Okay. And my other question was about the fees. It looked like there were some fees that there would either be the option of passing them on to the court users or the city paying, and I was just wondering about a decision on that.
Fees. What?
They had something about texts and phone calls, and then I think there were a couple other fees that might have been associated with the online piece if it moves that way.
Yeah, so when a defendant decides to pay, they have the option of paying their charges online. And so, for example, if somebody gets a speeding ticket and they just want to make the payment on, be done with it, move on with their lives, they can actually go to the city's website, log in, get to the court application, and just pay that online right now. But there's a convenience charge for doing that, a privilege fee for doing that, if you will.
Okay.
And so that's added on to those core costs, as opposed to somebody just physically walking in and paying it in person.
Got
We would
it.
continue to do that. Tyler also has the ability, I don't know if we're going to use this or not, but their system can actually, through an IVR application, contact defendants and let them know of upcoming court dates or of upcoming deadlines for payment, much like a text message or a call. There's a 20-cent charge for doing that. And we have not decided if we're going to use that or not. So that would be a 20-cent charge to use that IVR system through Tyler's application.
All right, thank you, Brian. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I'd just like to
Yes,
say,
Councilmember Davis.
I'd like to say thank you to the staff for all the work that you put in to analyze the information and make the selection. And I support it. And if there's no other question, I would move to put it on council for consent.
All right. Sounds good. Next up, we have action item number 5, which is our Gateway Redevelopment Agreement, Amendment number 3. Flora.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Flora. You'll recall that back in March of this year, we approved the second amendment to the third amended and restated Gateway Redevelopment Agreement. And that was as a result of the developer changing out one of their 2 private financiers for the project, moving away from the Carlisle Group to Cottonwood Capital. And so basically we were dropping in and changing out those names. What we realized after we sent off for the developer to execute was that we had transposed, or I think there were some additional corrections that needed to be made in terms of how the amounts that each of those lenders were going to be contributing to the project. So in order to keep these documents squared up, we have drafted the third amendment, and what you will see in your red line version is that essentially we are changing the dates and second to third, and then just flipping proof in section 1E, small letter D, that funding from Cottonwood Capital is now going to be Bank OZK in the minimum amount of 5.7, and then Cottonwood Capital will come in with a minimum of 13 million. And what you may recall from the larger structure is that before the first city dollars went in, we wanted to make sure that there was going to be this initial funding from Bank OZK, then followed by the second lender, now at this point Cottonwood Capital's contribution, and then Bank OZK would come in and basically pick up the much larger portion of the financing that they will be doing on the project. So just have prepared this for your consideration, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any questions? All right. Seeing none, would entertain a recommendation.
This is Ken Davis. I would recommend that we put this on consent, since I don't think it needs to be non-consent. It's just correcting and doing some editing, so I'd recommend consent.
All right, sounds good. That concludes our action items for this evening on finance and administration. We do have a couple of discussion items. Our first discussion item is voter engagement strategies with Laura Smith and Councilmember Boultinghouse.
Yes, and I'm going to kick this off very quickly and then hand it right off to Councilmember Boultinghouse. who reached out to me after returning from the National League of Cities conference earlier this year, energized about some ideas and things that he had heard surrounding voter engagement strategies. And I suspect several of the rest of you who were at that conference may have attended the same or similar workshops. But really wanted to just have an opportunity to talk with the committee about ways to do a better job of engaging and reaching our voters and increasing voter registration and voter turnout in our elections. So with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Boultinghouse, and he can take it away.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks everybody for letting me speak about this a little bit. Laura did mention that this came from something that I attended out at National League of Cities back in March, and I got to thinking about the relevance of it, and I went to look at the last two elections and the voter turnout percentages in both of those. And my ward and Ward 1, Hillary's ward, we have two precincts. One of those is majority renter. A lot of the apartments on the western side of Lamar Avenue, and those precincts are pretty consistently the lowest turnout percentage across the whole city. In 2018 midterm, there was 45% turnout there, where the rest of the city was 63%. And then in this most recent municipal election, we had just over 11% turnout there, where the city average was 16%. So I kind of look at it as a way to start it. This is just some small things to start addressing a little bit of that problem. And our packet kind of goes into it, but I thought that there might be kind of three areas based on some of the strategies that we talked about out at NLC. And it was a really fascinating discussion. It was with some mayors from Tennessee and a city administrator from Athens, Georgia. So they were kind of just sharing what they had done in their cities. And one of the things that they spoke about was having sort of like an evergreen just sentence or two explaining the deadlines of the voter registration, and just quickly how one could register to vote in all city mailers. They used the example of a sewer bill. I know in our case, like Mission Magazine's about the only thing that we have that goes to all residents. And so I wanted to explore the possibility of putting information just simply, here are the voter registration deadlines for the year. Here's how you register to vote, and linking to kind of the verbiage that the county election office has on their website. And really emphasizing some of the convenient ways to do that, like the text option that you can text in a picture of your application to a number and register that way. That would be more attractive to a lot of our renting communities, and especially folks who are more transient. So that was one option, sort of this evergreen mailer piece in the magazine. And then you might have seen recently that the county election office is going to send out advanced ballot applications to all registered voters in the county, and in light of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. And so, in a way to kind of promote the safety and well-being of all of our residents, and kind of keeping in line with our values that we've been espousing in each one of our disaster proclamations. I thought it would be a good idea if we wanted to consider like a small marketing campaign or some sort of like a little PR push, possibly in conjunction with Crux, to encourage as many of our residents to look for that and to take advantage of that, so that way they don't have to worry about in-person voting come November, when we may have more COVID waves or additional activity there. And so that might be an interesting thing to pair with on that. And then the third idea and the final idea that we talked about in this workshop was just passing a resolution, or just a statement kind of making the city acknowledge that we have a goal to increase voter turnout. And this might not necessarily work now, considering some of the changes we might be making to Mission Market, but some of the mayors talked about they like to have little contests between wards. So like for our Mission Market, I was thinking, whoever could potentially, have the most voter turnout gets a little bit of an award or something, or recognition at a market, just something to make it fun, make it kind of a game, and bring people engaged that way. But that one might be more of a TBD, considering the limitations we might have physically this year. But we could still try to think about the challenge thing, or making it more of a game. So with that being said, those were my 3 kind of proposals that I took from the conference. They had some more, they had more and less ambitious things that we talked about in those meetings, but I thought that these 3 kind of made the most sense to kind of fit the culture of our community, and so I just kind of wanted to turn it over to the rest of the body.
All right, thank you so much, Trent. Do we have any comments or questions related to these proposals?
It's Ken Davis.
Yep.
I think it's a good idea. I just wanted to get a sense from staff how this would be operationalized and how would it be moved forward to council action.
Well, I think if you were in agreement, I mean, we have in the Mission magazine, for example, so I'll start with probably the easiest one, and that is some sort of evergreen reminder about the importance of, you know, registering and participating in that process. We have particularly timed in magazine issues in the past around and closer to elections, we've included those calendars with registration deadlines and election dates and that sort of thing. So we could certainly easily modify that and make that, again, just kind of a standing item or something that's recognizable. In some fashion, we might want to move it around a little bit in the magazine. So maybe sometimes in the newsletter, sometimes on the bulletin board, sometimes some other places, just to keep it fresh enough so that it catches people's eye and it's something that, you know, doesn't get lost in the shuffle of, oh, that's the same old, you know, same old kind of thing. So I think that's an easy thing to do. And if people are comfortable with that, we can certainly incorporate that as soon as the issue of the magazine that's getting close to going to print here before too long. I think in terms of some of the other ideas, you know, we can certainly look at doing something and developing as we build out kind of that communications plan and cycles and timing and that calendar that we're working on with Crux. We can certainly look at how do we timely place reminders and posts and things that can encourage, so that it's built into our, you know, our processes, and we're not, you know, sort of scrambling to remember it, you know, as a deadline might approach. So certainly there's some ways to build that into structure that keeps it front and center. Again, building a common look and feel and messaging around all of that. I think if the council wanted to pass a resolution to set a goal, you know, we may want to sit down and think about that a little bit more, about how do we do a friendly competition? What does that look like? But that, if you wanted to approach that in some fashion, I think you could certainly do a resolution. You know, that's a good, easy way for you to communicate that. You could, you know, we could work on that, and that could come forward as an action item. And then, you know, I would kind of turn it, if it's a competition, we would certainly turn it back to you as the elected officials, because it's not really staff's role, although we certainly want to encourage people to participate in the process. We would let that competition aspect probably be up to you in terms of how cutthroat you wanted to be in terms of increasing voter percentages in each of your wards.
All right, and then Laura, will we also be able to promote the vote by mail option, as people are receiving those ballots on our social media platforms and that piece?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think those are, you know, easy things to do. So I think the only thing that really requires potentially future action would be if you wanted to, you know, take some sort of action or promote a competition in some fashion. And I think there was some conversation, I believe the mayor and I were talking several months ago, that there was some talk that some other groups may be looking at trying to do community competitions among or between communities. I don't know that, I haven't heard that has gotten off the ground, but I know it is an idea or concept that, you know, several other groups are talking about.
Okay, great. And Councilmember Inman, did you have a comment about tying this to our census related activities as well?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Brent for for bringing this up, but I also think if we could also tie it in with the census, because I'm sure that population could be reached out to as well, to encourage them to complete the census.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 in 1.
Why not?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I got.
Councilmember Flora, I have a.
Yes, Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, Trent, thanks for bringing this up. I'm up for some healthy competition. I think we could, wipe the floor nicely with that. No, I'm kidding. But I like the idea of wrapping it in around COVID with advanced ballots. I think that that's something that would be really appetizing to people who are nervous about heading to the polls. So that's a great idea.
Thanks.
I agree. All right. Any other questions or comments for Trent? Do we like all these ideas and want to move forward? I see some head nodding. Anything else?
I think these are just discussion items for now. I mean, I think putting some stuff in the magazine would be great, and some of the communications that are going out through maybe the social media channels or whatever, just as a reminder, and linking people back to the website. I mean, I will say, I think Johnson County, the election office there does a great job of making the resources available. And I don't mean for this to be taken the wrong way, but if you live in Johnson County and you don't get out to vote, it's probably not because you didn't have the resources to figure out where to go and how to register. There's probably some other reasons why you may not have done it, maybe other priorities or whatever. But I think from what I've seen around here, people have really done a lot to try to put the resources out there and make it really easy to get to where you need to go to register and where you need to go to vote. So hopefully we can see some upturn in some of the numbers. I mean, we will this year because it's going to be a presidential year, but I don't know, on some of the more local level things, I don't know how much, like, where's your point of diminishing returns on how much you put out there versus how much you'll actually see people show up to vote.
Well, to that, I just say, any additional person who maybe comes to vote as a result of seeing any of this, especially kind of given the low lift or the light lift it would take, seems worth it. I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff out there, but there were a lot of folks I met kind of knocking doors who were just confused even that like municipal elections were a thing and didn't realize that there was voting outside of presidential years. So
I'm with you 100%, Trent, and I agree. Things that we can do with a light lift. I would caution that I don't think that this is somewhere where I'd be, at least for me, I wouldn't really be in favor of staff spending a ton of time working to put any kind of separate mailers or anything like that together, because there are a lot of resources out there and we've got a lot of other priorities that we also have to have staff focus on. But if we can weave it in with the magazine and with some of the crux stuff, I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
I'm with you though on when I was doing door knocking in the past, I mean, there were people that would not have any clue what was going on at the local level, and I don't think that that's a whole lot that the city can really do about it. I mean, if people are just that disengaged with it, I don't know that there's a whole lot without really going around and having people knock on doors we'd be able to do to get people more engaged. I don't know.
Yeah.
If we just say that we're going to raise everyone's taxes 20% if they don't show up and vote, then we'll see. I think that's a strategy. If you really want to drive voter engagement, just tell them.
I do think if we can move forward with the resolution, and it looks like there are some easy samples, so it hopefully wouldn't take a lot of staff time. If we could bring that for consideration as an action item, sometime soon, then maybe some of the friendly competition that Trent has suggested would help.
Sure.
Yeah. I think Councilmember Schlesmacher, raise taxes or give free puppies, right?
Yeah,
Puppies,
right.
Either one.
If we get enough percentage of people to vote, we'll give you free puppies. Or if we don't, then we're going to raise taxes by 20% or more. Either of those will definitely drive voter turnout. Aside from that, I just don't know. I'm not saying we shouldn't try some of the lightweight stuff we can do, but I just don't know that I'd be a little worried too about setting any lofty goals and feeling like we missed our goals for getting engagement and voter turnout on some of these things, right? If we said we 30% in a non-presidential year, for example, I don't know. It's going to be.
I would add though that, you know, NLC does have an entire, National League of Cities does have an entire campaign around this issue. So I do think that they think there's something that cities can do to help. And so I appreciate Councilmember Boultinghouse bringing this forward, and you can try some of these ideas and see how it goes.
Yeah, sure.
No, I think it's great, but I do think that point of, you know, in the sense of however we can move the dial and move the needle in the right direction is worth celebrating. So let's set it up and couch it in a way that we feel successful with whatever effort, you know, with whatever effort that we have. And I think that's my takeaway from what Councilmember Schlesmacher is, you know, sharing.
Sounds good.
Okay,
I
so would
appreciate
you
everyone's
like us
comments.
to draft a resolution and bring that back? Would you like to see it as an action item or a discussion item on your June agenda?
Yeah,
It could
that
be an
sounds-
action item.
Action item? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Trent. Our final item on this agenda is the selection of our committee chair and vice chair. Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. This item each year, according to our ordinances, in June, the council shall vote to elect a chair and a vice chair of each of our committees. So one for finance and administration, one for community development. And so we just like to put this on as a discussion item so that if there's any questions that you all have or anything that you want to discuss about interest or any of those kinds of things, you have that opportunity. And then typically we would put that on as an action item or as a new business item on your May 20th City Council agenda. And sometimes we've done it a variety of different ways over the years. Sometimes it's just shown up on the agenda, and that always feels a little bit awkward. So we at least like to telegraph a couple of weeks in advance and remind folks that that opportunity to make some transitions in the leadership for our committees is around the corner.
Great.
Sollie, this is Ken Davis.
Yes.
I just had a chance to discuss a little bit in our agenda review. This is obviously a discussion item that's going to be also on the Community Development Committee. And just from my personal experience of being a new member of the council, I found it very helpful to be a participant in the leadership role and having the opportunity to review these items ahead of time and have the discussion in preparation for the meetings, and then certainly the opportunity to run the meetings. And I think that both the chairs that have been serving have done an excellent job, and I continue to like to see you in those positions, but I would like to give an opportunity for Trent to also become active as a new council member. And therefore, I am taking my name off of the list of candidates so that if Trent wants to take one of the positions or put his name up, that he could do that. I also think it's helpful to have a balance among the wards, in terms of that function. So just being mindful of that, I would encourage us to keep that in mind. So those are my comments.
Great.
I agree with everything that Councilmember Flora, I agree with everything that Ken said, and I'm happy to step down from my chair role in community development. I know we're not there yet, but just wanted to put that out there. And Trent, I think you do a great job in any of these positions. And I'm interested in checking out what finance and administration is all about, considering I have spent the last year with CDC, not Center for Disease Control. I have to clarify that now. Yeah, so just throwing that out there. Trent, let us know where you want to live.
Yeah. And I would just add, I'm happy to continue on one of the committees, or if there's overwhelming interest and 4 other people new people who want to do it, then by all means as well.
yeah, it's certainly flattering. I'd be happy to throw my name out there and see what everyone thinks for CDC.
All right. Any other comments? Again, this will come up on our other committee agenda as well. Right. Hearing none, that concludes the business of our Finance and Administration Committee.
Great. Okay, so let's move right into community development. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, good deal. That moved a lot faster than I thought it would, so that's great news. It's 7:36 on May 6th. We can open it up now for public comments. This is an opportunity for folks to share anything with this group that isn't on the agenda. So if you have something you want to talk about that's on the agenda, I see some familiar names and faces, so we might have some comments. Just hold those for that specific action item. But this is a good chance now. You can use the chat feature that's down at the bottom. Just as a reminder, everyone can see what you chat, so beware. But feel free to ask questions. This is a good time for that. All right, not seeing anything, we'll go ahead and move on. Again, when we get to specific action items, you can use that chat feature and make comments that way, and then we'll ask for clarification if there's anything else verbally we need to discuss. Okay, moving on, we have no public presentations. We'll move into action items. First up for action items is our acceptance of the April 8th, 2020 Community Development Committee minutes. Audrey McClanahan. I hope I said that correct.
Yes, thank you. Okay, yes, I submitted the minutes from last month's meeting for your review and consideration. Thank you again.
Okay, great. Do those look good to everyone?
Yes, they look fine to me, and I would go ahead and recommend that we accept them.
Great. All right, next up, action item 2. We have a contract award for the Rock Creek Channel Improvement Project. Celia Duran.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council members. First of all, I want to welcome some of the residents that are attending our virtual meeting tonight to listen to our discussion on Rock Creek. So thank you for your participation. This project includes construction of retaining walls, channel modifications, and parking lot improvements along Rock Creek from east of Knoll Avenue to Roland Drive to address erosion and flooding concerns, including subsidence of parking lots for the Roland Courts Homes Association and MG Management on the north side. Residents on the south side of the channel also have backyards and fences that are continuing to erode and subside as well. And one benefit of this project is that we will remove some properties that are currently in the floodplain. We'll remove them out of the floodplain. So that's always beneficial to the property owners. And, you know, there's floodplain insurance and things like that that they will no longer have to pay. So the timeline for this project includes design beginning in June 2019 with completion in January 2020. During this time, we also worked with residents and businesses to obtain easements. And we're still working on one that I think that the city administrator is going to talk about later. The project was bid in February with a bid opening date of March 16th, 2020. And 9 contractors attended the pre-bid meeting. Unfortunately, we only received 1 bid, which was above the engineer's estimate, including the contingency that was in the original project budget. Staff and the designer contacted every contractor that attended the pre-bid to find out why they didn't submit a bid. Unfortunately, our timing for bid opening occurred just when the pandemic hit, and no one was sure that they would be allowed to work or whether they would have available staffing. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's reflected in the number of contractors that didn't submit bids. So unfortunately, our bid opening occurred at the worst time for this project. The bid also included 2 alternates that we discussed with you in November. These bid alternates included an access ramp to the channel and extending a wall on the north side of the channel to address potential erosion in the future. Although we believe these alternates could enhance the project and reduce future maintenance costs, staff is not recommending including these alternates at a cost of $259,945 due to budget constraints. The table in the council action form shows a comparison of the current budget versus estimated cost for the project. And as you can see, the project is estimated to be $188,525 or 3.59% over budget. Although the construction costs in the bid do include a $100,000 contingency in case unknown conditions are found in the field during construction. We did have a geotechnical firm take a look at the soil, so we're not anticipating anything big, but there's always some surprises in the field, so that's kind of why we would have the contingency. And it will only be spent as necessary to complete the project. So as with the Lamar project, city staff worked with GBA, the designer, and Gunter Construction to look at any areas for cost savings. The evaluation resulted in delaying council consideration for 1 month, but we believe it was a necessary step in our due diligence process. So after this evaluation, we ultimately determined there were no areas we could really cut that wouldn't negatively impact the project. And just to let you know, some of the areas we talked about, we tried to talk about everything we could. One was the stormwater pipe improvements. We're replacing those on a residential property next to the property that we purchased for access. And we decided that, we don't want to have to go back in their backyard and tear it up again. And so that's one reason we thought we should include it in the project. GBA also worked with Gunter in hopes of reducing the wall price. However, they're pretty firm on their pricing. GBA also looked at the design of the retaining walls, and in some areas on the outside portion of the channel that wouldn't get as much scouring, they talked about reducing the depth of the footing. But after a lot of discussion, it would also depend on what we find in the field that may or may not happen. And so we felt that we wanted to be more conservative and make sure that this wall is going to last a long time. GBA feels comfortable with it, but I think we would recommend not exercising that option. The city administrator will be discussing and presenting a spreadsheet that shows there are sufficient funds in the stormwater utility to complete this project. And staff recommends moving forward with the project due to the following. We have a number of residents and businesses that are really anticipating this project beginning this year. Roland Courts Homes Association entered into an agreement, including finance, with the city to complete this project. And if it's delayed, they won't be able to use their parking lots for another year. And there is always a possibility that more subsidence could occur in that area. Also, 4 residents and 1 business donated land for use as a permanent drainage easement and a temporary construction easement in anticipation that this project would occur this year and address their erosion issues in their backyards. We did look at rebidding the project later in hopes of getting more bids and maybe a lower price, but after really thinking about it, we're not sure we would get a lower price just because the contractor would have to maintain the project over winter, and they may not be able to work in the stream just depending how the weather conditions are. So if the contract is approved, the construction is estimated to begin in late May and be substantially complete by the end of 2020, with a final restoration completed in the spring of 2021. And the main reason is if we get the wall done, before the end of the year, we really doesn't benefit us to try to do sod or replace trees and things like that. Upon approval of this contract, staff is discussing sending a project status letter because I know a number of the residents were anticipating getting this started earlier. So having some kind of communications and potentially a meeting, but we need to think about how we would do that with COVID-19 and social distancing. So Gunter plans to begin clearing the trees first and then starting on the retaining wall, and they would start on the west side and move east. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Celia. Councilmember Flora?
Yes, Celia, I just had a couple of questions about this firm, given that it is a sole bid. Could you just explain sort of what we know about them, if they've done other channel projects like this?
Gunter Construction did our Reed's Road Bridge replacement project. So that was a really small project, but they did a good job. They're actually subbing out the wall construction to MSE, and they're well known for installing retaining walls, large block retaining walls. So we feel good about that. We also had GBA call around and give us, find some references, and everybody said that, they recommended that we go with Gunter because they've done a good job on their projects.
Okay, including projects of this size or the substantial?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it looks like Laura was wanting to screen share something with us. Laura, you're muted.
Yep, I'm muted, sorry. I've lost, well, I'm gonna share a screen, and for some reason I've been fighting with this spreadsheet for an hour and a half today, and it keeps dropping something off. So, oh, no, there it is. I just put it, I'm looking for it in the wrong spot. So what I wanted to do is similar to what we did when we kind of showed you the impact of the difference in our budget estimates on Lamar. We wanted to take our stormwater CIP and the 5-year plan and show you if you were to approve the contracts. And what we've done in this case is both for the Rock Creek Channel project, and then also for item number 4 on your agenda for the 51st and Lamar stormwater repairs. You'll see that here under capital projects, we've updated the construction price to match what's in your agenda packet tonight, and then we've added the $60,000 there. So what you can see, what I am just trying to show you here is that with those, if you were to approve both of those contracts, we would have an ending fund balance at the end of 2020 and the stormwater utility CIP of $401,000. When we adopted the budget, the 2020 budget in August of 2019, we were anticipating an ending fund balance in 2020 of $616,420. So a difference of $215,136. That doesn't match up exactly with the $188,000 that Rock Creek is over, and then the $60,000, and that's because you had some better performance in revenues, and particularly when we look up here at the top in terms of well, no, I'm not showing it. Anyway, you had better performance in revenues, in interest income, and stormwater utility in 2019 that carried over and gave you kind of a stronger fund balance than what we had anticipated starting 2020. So that's part of why when you look at these ending, so 2 things, when you look at these ending fund balances, because I know I've had some questions about the bid alternates that were included, so the ramp for maintenance and then the extension of the retaining wall, one for $94,000, the other for the $259,000 that Celia referenced. Obviously that would bring our fund balance down. We would still have excess fund balance, but we would be cutting it a little bit close for comfort in at least my world. Particularly when you look at, we rely on and have built this debt service structure and repayment around that $600,000 a year gateway special assessment. So my concern would be if we funded those additional bid alternates and then you missed a year or missed a payment from the gateway for for some reason, you would find yourself making some, I think, more difficult budgetary decisions. So that's why we didn't recommend doing the moving forward with the bid alternates primarily at this point. So I'm happy to stop there. As Celia mentioned, if the council, it appears to be moving this forward for consideration, we would start to prepare a notice, and ideally we would like to actually get a notice out to the residents and impacted property owners so that we could continue to move this down the field as quickly as we can. I think Celia also mentioned we do still have one easement that's outstanding. I think everyone knows we are prepared and had actually filed the petition for condemnation about the time the court shut down for COVID-19 related issues. And Pete Heaven, our land use attorney, and I had a conversation on Monday with attorneys for that property owner. And I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed that we will be able to resolve this and bring something forward to you for your consideration at your May 20th meeting, so that we can just keep all of this moving forward on the same schedule.
Okay, thank you, Laura. What questions do we have for Laura surrounding this, or Celia surrounding the project?
Chairman Towers. This is Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Hi. I just wanted to say that we did have a conversation in the review of our agenda, and the discussion was around the necessity of the ramp, and also whether it would be important to do the extension of the wall at this point in time. And I think that through our conversation, we were both satisfied with the fact that we can move forward and still not have the ramp. We can do the clean out of the creek and the stormwater channel without necessarily having that ramp in place. Plus the fact that there's potential development on the north side, there may be some coordination with that project eventually that would allow us to do some work on the extension. I don't know if that's accurate reflection of our conversation, Laura, but I believe that satisfied our questions.
Yes, I think that is an accurate reflection of what we discussed during our agenda review.
Hillary, I have a comment, if it's okay.
Yeah. Debbie.
This is not specific to this particular project, but I'd like us to have like forward thinking as we go down the road. Anytime we're doing major transit projects, stormwater projects, I want us to keep in mind how we collectively get our hands around eventually burying utility lines. If there's some commonality with the timing and projects that that are linked together by geography, eventually I'd really like to look at us getting a full spectrum of what it would be like to have buried utility lines. So it may not be for now discussion now, but I don't want to get that off the table if possible.
Personally, I'm ready to see this project move forward. I know a lot of the residents with RCHA have been waiting for this for 3 years. It's time to move forward, despite the bid being a bit over, which obviously we don't want to see, but it sounds like we need to strike now. So I'm excited to see this move forward, particularly for those residents. If we have any other council comments, let's touch those, and then if there's any members of the public that have something they want to share, coming up soon will be the time. Yep, Sollie.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank those residents that are impacted by this project that have taken the time to call in tonight, and to just on the record thank everyone for their patience and cooperation with the city on this.
Definitely. Are there any members of the public that want to comment or have anything they want to share? Okay. Seeing none, I think we are ready to consider. Are we ready to move this forward?
Yes, I would. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say take it to council. Non-consent would be my recommendation.
I agree.
Great. Council non-consent. All right, so let's move on to action item number 3. We have 56th and Fox Ridge asphalt repairs with Brent Morton.
Can everybody hear me?
Hi, Brent.
Yep.
Hey, all right, sounds good. I appreciate it. Staff is recommending a contract be approved with Superior Boeing for the intersection at 56th Street and Fox Ridge for an amount not to exceed $15,840. The Kansas Department of Transportation recently awarded ramp repairs to Superior Boeing along Metcalf. I'm sure most of you council members have had phone calls about those ramps and pothole problems for the last 5 years. So they're starting to get that addressed. Superior Boeing reached out to us once that contract was approved with KDOT or Kansas Department of Transportation and offered us if we wanted to complete that intersection. It was discussed of doing it with the Phase 1 Fox Ridge projects in 2017. At that point, KDOT was in discussions of reconfiguring that intersection because it is kind of dangerous coming off Metcalf right there. They have not landed on any changes there, so they're going to finally fix the ramps and mill and overlay that project, and also in conjunction with some work on Shawnee Mission Parkway. So it gives us the opportunity to fix that intersection now because we held off because we didn't know what KDOT was going to do, and we didn't want to spend money where it was just going to get tore out recently. So by working with Superior Boeing on this project, it gives us the opportunity not to have any cold joints, do the whole intersection at one time. They're doing the work on a Saturday in one day, so minimal traffic impacts to the public. So it's a good project. Superior Boeing worked with staff on pricing. KDOT's price, they've got a lot more legwork with their projects, is about $51 a square yard. They came down to $20 a square yard for the city of Mission pricing. Which is a good price. I checked with some of our past bid tabs and other contractors, and it's falls right in there with average pricing for a project this size. So I think it's a good project. It works out, getting the ramps fixed. We get numerous phone calls and complaints about these ramps, and we're doing the right thing too by fixing our intersection. It is a heavily traveled area, so staff's recommending a 2-inch mill and overlay for this. It's about 792 square yards of asphalt replacement. KDOT specified mix. It's a good asphalt, so we'll get a long life out of this project. And it's something I think that needs to be done, and it's good we can work with Superior Boeing and get this done, and KDOT, Kansas Department of Transportation at the same time. So I'd entertain any questions or comments on this.
Thank you, Brent. It is something that desperately needs to be done. I think we all know that. Do we have any questions or comments for Brent?
I would just like to say, Brent, I appreciate the update, and I know that some people that work in some of the businesses right near that intersection will be very, very happy with getting that fixed finally, because I've definitely heard quite a bit about it. So it's awesome. It's a good update.
Yeah, and
I have to use that intersection every day. That's perfect.
so just for council, so you guys, if you have any phone calls or anything, after your next council meeting, that Saturday is when Superior Boeing is planning on doing this work. So there is a set date, as long as weather permits, that intersection will be done this month and milled over. So it'll be fixed this month, which is good news.
Thanks, Brent.
Appreciate
That
it.
is good news. Okay, are we ready to move that forward on consent?
Consent, yes.
Yep, let's take it.
Wonderful, thank you.
So May
Okay.
23rd, just for the minutes or for anything else, that would be May 23rd, I think, if I'm interpreting Brent's dates correctly.
You're correct, Laura. Thank you.
Okay.
We look forward to May 23rd. Okay. All right, so next up we have item number 4, 51st and Lamar Stormwater Repairs, Celia Duran.
So this agenda item includes consideration of approval to authorize the city administrator to approve a change order with Superior Bowen for stormwater repairs at 51st and Lamar in an amount not to exceed $60,000. So as you know, BHC Roads has been out inventorying our stormwater system and assigning condition ratings. And this will help us not only so we know where we need to have repairs, but also we can apply for additional funding from Johnson County for stormwater improvements. So that will be helpful. So during the process, there were a number of pipes that BHC couldn't inspect due to clogging or other things. Like there was one pipe that they didn't even want to get in and because they're afraid it was in poor condition. We didn't want to make it worse. So we did hire A1 to go out and jet out all of our pipes with a high pressure water flow so we could complete the cleaning. And after the pipe at 51st and Lamar was re-inspected, we found that there was a large boulder in the pipe. We don't know how it got there. And it's right at a 90-degree bend in the pipe. And typically you would have a manhole there instead of a bend, but that's, you know, old construction, and that's really the problem with the backup. We also found that the CMP pipe under the road is considered failed. It got a rating of 5 for Johnson County stormwater rating system, so it's really rusted out and needs replacement. And we also found on the southwest corner a clogged inlet and a pipe that had backups because the pipe is undersized. It's an 8-inch pipe, and so typically we like to at least see a minimum of 15-inch, and so that's part of the issue here. So we were unaware of the blockage until after the Lamar project was bid, but we've quickly moved with Olson on a design solution in hopes that we can get this done with the Lamar UBAS project so that we don't have to go back in the future and open cut new pavement. Olson has developed a preliminary design under short notice, and they've done a little bit of survey, so they know that there's every utility you can name is out there in this intersection. But they're currently potholing all the utilities to make sure that there are no utility conflicts, because if we have a big utility conflict, you know, that's really going to delay it, and we don't want to delay Lamar. So that's when we'd have to go back and look at another solution. So once this is completed, and it should be this week, we're going to request a price from Superior Bowen to consider this work with the project. They are aware of the issue, and they believe they can complete this work with no delays to the project. So originally, Olson provided a draft cost estimate of $45,000. We are currently recommending a contingency of $15,000 to address any changes due to utilities and subject to final costs from Superior Bowen. This would be a change order for the project, but it would be paid for using the stormwater utility funds. If the change order is improved, they would begin work at the intersection right away, and they're working right now. Well, they've just cut the concrete pavement on the south side, so they're trying to focus on that, and then they could jump on the stormwater at the same time at the north side and get that done before we move up there. They will need to shut down portions of this intersection for up to 2 weeks, and so detour rights signage would be posted informing drivers of the closure. So in closure, I just wanted to add that once our stormwater inventory is completed, we will be aware of all failed pipe and blockages within our system, and we'll be able to incorporate improvements to this failed pipe into our street projects during the design process.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you, Celia. Do we have any questions or comments?
This is Ken Davis.
Okay.
Celia, I just want to say this is a great example of why we're doing the right thing in terms of BHC roads and doing the studies to understand what we have in our infrastructure and be able to address it early and not have to do things after the fact in terms of trying to correct things. So this is a great example of why we're taking the right steps in terms of understanding what we have to deal with. So I'm definitely in support of this and would recommend it for a consent agenda.
Okay, so we'll plan to take this to consent unless we have any other questions or comments. As a reminder to the public, if you have a comment on anything we're working through, you're welcome to use the chat feature to ask a question or make a comment. Okay, so moving on, next up, we have item number 5, indoor pool deck repair and resurfacing with Parks and Rec Director Penn Almany.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I come before you today to recommend approving a contract with Blastic Clean for overlay removal of the Powell Community Center pool deck in an amount not to exceed $33,788, as well as a contract with Hardscape to repair and resurface the indoor pool deck in an amount not to exceed $50,433.75. Some of the details behind that recommendation are 2012 was the most recent pool deck surfacing. Useful pool deck is between 5 and 10 years, depending on use patterns and traffic areas. So we had set aside $40,000 to be utilized in the capital improvement plan this year for that replacement. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, there were several noticeable pool deck stains kind of bleeding through, orange in color. It was determined to be oxidation, and those were all in higher traffic areas. So we solicited feedback from a concrete specialist, and he gave us some scenarios. Could have been ruptured circulation plumbing, could be a contamination in the concrete rebar. All of these were worst case scenarios that kind of raised alarms. So we decided to, in March 2020, contract with Blastic Clean to create a test area to kind of get to the root of the problem and find out what this oxidation was resulting from. And it was determined to be from expansion joints, the metal filler that was placed in there to keep the concrete separated. So it was probably best case scenario. Unfortunately, in the process, we realized that in order to resurface, the current surface needed to come up. So that involved an element of expense that we had not anticipated. So right now we're dealing with two components. Number one is the overlay removal, and number two is the actual resurfacing that we had originally budgeted for. So unfortunately, the overlay that's currently in place is an epoxy and a rock mixture, similar to the asphalt that we've all been discussing this evening. And that was chosen because it was a least cost option, very durable, and could weather use patterns that we were anticipating. So once we found this out, we solicited bids. We got 4 bids listed on the action item. Blastic Clean came in for just the overlay removal at $33,788. Hardscape came in at just resurfacing at $50,433. Then we had Mid-America Pool Renovation, who bid on the entire project, overlay removal, as well as the resurfacing for $76,890. And then a fourth vendor, Speakman Coatings, just bid on the resurfacing for $58,966. So there are a couple nuances within their bids. The reason we're recommending Blastic Clean and Hardscape, even though they are more expensive, is because they have a 2-year guarantee on their product versus Mid-America's 1-year guarantee. The project timeline is a week shorter. They have a guarantee on the tile repair and replacement, as well as the concrete chipping and the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system cleaning. So they also have a barrier that completely encompasses the work area as opposed to just on one side. And what we're dealing with is it's a hydroblasting element, 40,000 BTUs of pressure blasting at this rock and epoxy. And then what happens is a bigger section will just break off and kind of blast up against the barrier. And if there isn't one completely surrounding, that'll chip away at our structure, our foundation, and obviously the tile elements. So we want that to be as part of the consideration. And then the pool deck project is over budget, but we took steps to mitigate that by repairing and replacing some elements on the Mission Family Aquatic Center internally as opposed to externally. We saved $36,000 there. And then we are replacing lap lines, not completely, but instead of buying brand new ones, we're just going to use new cable inside the existing ones. So that'll save us $12,000 there for a total savings available to add on to this budget of $48,000, which brings us to a total usable budget of $88,000. So in light of these considerations, we recommend Blast It Clean and Hardscape in an amount not to exceed $84,221.84. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Penn. Yes, any questions? I appreciate the pictures. Pictures are always nice to see how bad the damage is.
It really tells the story, right?
It does. It does. Okay, are we ready to move this to consent?
Yes, I would recommend consent.
Fantastic. Thank you, Penn. Oh, I think you're still here for next up, the community center exterior wood staining and maintenance.
Our second recommendation is that we approve a contract with Distinctive Quality Painting for exterior wood staining and maintenance at the community center in an amount not to exceed $14,220. So you're all very familiar with the Powell Community Center entrance, as well as that southern breezeway. It's an absolute beauty and a marvel. Lots of picturesque opportunities for our rental groups, as well as members and drop-in patrons. Because of deferred maintenance, as well as heat, rain, wind, and UV rays, it's kind of eroded some of that natural character and beauty. So manufacturer recommendations is that we stain every 2 to 3 years. The last time that's happened was 10 years ago. And you can kind of see that it's in dire need of it based on the pictures and the action item. This work was originally budgeted to coincide with the 2019 CIP schedule. And because of staff vacancies as well as priorities that adjusted the timelines, we're now getting to it at the beginning of 2020. So we solicited 3 firms. Stain Pro opted out because of their current volume of work. Premier Painting Company submitted a bid just for the damage to the wood pergola and not the southern breezeway. And then Distinctive Quality Painting bid on the entire project. Southern breezeway, all preparation, sanding, and repair of needed elements. So in light of these details, we recommend the contract be awarded to Distinctive Quality Painting in an amount not to exceed $14,220. We had originally set aside $15,000 for this project to be completed. Are there any questions?
Yes, any questions about this? Are we ready to take this to consent as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Penn.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have item number 7, nuisance abatement services contract award with Rebecca Brown.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. So I'm here to present the nuisance abatement services contract. We sent it out for bid. Nuisance abatement services are provided on an as-needed basis when property owners don't comply with property maintenance codes. Abatement services include cutting grass, tree trimming, and debris removal. We did receive 3 bids back. The city uses a third-party contractor to perform these services, and then we bill the cost back to the property owner. We are recommending that the contracts be awarded to 2 bidders, Custom Tree Care and Verholst & Sons, for 2020 through 2021.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Do we have any questions or comments? I bet Councilmember Inman utilizes this service quite. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. We all know Kristin loves making a call. I'm kidding. Do we have any questions for Rebecca?
Good job, Becca.
Thank you. It's my first council presentation. I was a little nervous.
You did great. You did great.
You did.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, are we ready to take this to consent?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Wonderful. So that's going to move us into our discussion items. This might be a lengthier conversation, which I know we'll turn over to Laura here, but I do just want to prep anyone that is in the Zoom call with us that's interested in making any comments to please use the chat feature if you're interested in commenting, or if you have a question for anyone, please use that chat feature when it becomes an appropriate time, and I'll make sure to let you know when that time is. So we're looking at action item number 8, COVID-19 updates and operational impacts, reopening recommendations with City Administrator Laura Smith.
All right, thank you. And Emily, if you wouldn't mind, I thought what we would do is in your packets, I tried to show this both in a matrix form and as in a memo and in more narrative form in some instances. So what I think I would like to do, if it's okay with the committee, is walk through the memo, and I'm going to move my other computer because I've got notes in 12 places. But
you ready to share now?
What?
Are you
Okay,
ready
so,
to share now?
yeah, so share the screen. So what I'm going to ask Emily to do is share the matrix. So we may do a little bit of jumping around and scrolling around in the matrix as I walk through, because not everything is in exactly the same order, but that will give us an opportunity to, you know, and ask questions. And please, I think what is going to be easiest and maybe most appropriate as we have this conversation is for you all to stop, because it's going to be, there's a lot of ground to cover. And so I think it's probably better for us to cover questions, comments, concerns in each sort of operational or program area before we move on to the next, rather than trying to hold everything to the end. So if that's all right with Chairman Thomas, that's what I would recommend as we move through this. So as everyone knows, the reason why we're Zooming tonight and meeting virtually has to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have really spent almost exclusively all of our time as a staff and as a council in many respects since about March 13th, thinking about our response as a city in looking at maintaining the health and safety of our residents, supporting our businesses, maintaining the health and safety for our employees. There's been a whole host of stay-at-home orders and public health orders and recovery and reopening recommendations that have circulated that we've tried to keep up with. And at least for today, the dust has, I think, settled long enough for us to be able to feel like we could come back and make some recommendations to you. So I'm going to step through those and knowing that we've talked about this, you know, all along the way, but for the benefit of some of the members of the public who I know are joining us this evening, you know, the council has been, I think council and staff both have been conservative in our approach, supportive of our employees while trying to balance and maintain as much from a service delivery perspective as was reasonable and feasible throughout all of this. So as we all know, in April, both our Governor Laura Kelly and the Johnson County Board of Public Health issued stay-at-home orders as a public health mitigation strategy to sort of slow the spread of COVID-19. Throughout the course of those orders, as I mentioned, we've been engaged in interpretation, enforcement, application, both internally and externally, and thinking about both short and long-term implications, and particularly as we were reaching expiration dates with both of those orders, Last week, we have been reviewing and evaluating the impacts on our various city facilities and services. So last Thursday, the governor announced that the statewide stay-at-home order was being lifted. And at that same time, she introduced a recovery and reopening plan for the state. And the link to that plan, Ad Astra, a plan to reopen Kansas, was included in your in the memo in your packet. So if you hadn't had the opportunity to review that, I wanted to make that easily available to you. And so throughout this, I'm just going to refer to that as the plan. And then prior to the statewide reopening and recovery plan, Johnson County had convened a task force that had representatives from the business community, from the health, public health sector, law enforcement, elected officials, city manager types, just really economists, a nice cross-section of folks who were working on a plan specific to Johnson County. As it turned out, following the governor's introduction of the plan on Thursday last week, the Board of County Commissioners decided to effectively scrap the recovery plan that they had been discussing and follow the state's plan, with one minor caveat or exception, and that was that they kept a stay-at-home order in place through Monday, May 11th, whereas the governor's stay-at-home orders expired this past Monday, May 4th. So as we've looked at that, you know, the state's plan, although it's not particularly clear in the language as it's written, is based on an analysis on a rolling 14-day cycle in terms of when you move, the gating criteria that will be applied to move from phase to phase. So dates, any dates that you see in anything that is included in the state's plan, the county's reopening documents, our reopening documents, or others throughout Johnson County are going to be sort of best case scenario or no sooner than, based on reopening dates throughout this process. So again, that makes it a little bit difficult for us. Part of our challenge is how do we create reopening strategies that are easy to communicate both to employees and to the public when the dates are effectively in a constant state of flux. But we will do our best, and so throughout this conversation, you'll see some recommendations which sort of straddle two phases, and as we get to those, I'll explain kind of our rationale for making the recommendation from the staff perspective. Also included in your memorandum was a link to a simple reopening guide that Johnson County has put out that mirrors and sort of just presents in a different format some of the information from the state's plan. It is our understanding that although Johnson County extended the stay-at-home orders for 1 week beyond those of the states, that their intent is to transition to phase 2 with the state. So next Monday, when the Johnson County stay-at-home orders expire, they will be in phase 1, and they will transition to phase 2 at the same time as the rest of the state. So there will not be a corresponding lag through all of the phases just because there was a lag in the removal of the stay-at-home orders. And so that was a question and a point that hadn't been entirely clear early in the process, but I think we've been able to clarify that in conversation. So I'm going to step through each recommendation below and the estimated impact that we think it has on the public. I also sent out, and we can go through later, I sent out a kind of budgetary estimates and implications for each of these, where we're able to sort of assign a dollar amount to any savings or other financial impacts that might be included. So the first area that I'm just going to touch on are city facilities that are except for the community center. So public facilities in the instance of the matrix here is going to revolve around City Hall, the police department, and our public works facility. Our facilities have been closed to the public since March 13th. Most of the other communities, particularly in Northeast Johnson County, have been closed within a week of that. There are cities, Olathe, Overland Park, Lenexa, for example, in Johnson County that have never closed their public facilities entirely to the public throughout this entire pandemic situation. So, and one of the things that has been exempted in all of the looks at essential businesses and functions has been governmental functions. So we've had that ability all along, and we've chosen since March 13th to close our facilities to the public. We are recommending that, and so what we've done is we've been having employees working remotely or on staggered schedules. And as we've talked about, you know, before, they're tracking if they're unable to complete city work through May 15th. The council had agreed to keep our employees whole through COVID-19 pay structure that was approved. But our goal was to really try to reduce the staff in any particular work area to about 50% or less of what a typical occupancy would be. As we move into the reopening phases, our recommendation at this point would be to open those facilities, again, City Hall, Police Department, and the Public Works facility, to the public by June 1st. So they could be open now, they could be open tomorrow. We're looking at delaying that opening to June 1st because we feel that it's going to be very important to bring employees gradually back into the workplace. For those of us who have been in the facilities on a more regular basis, we've developed new processes and procedures and protocols, and you know, how we move around the building and how we sanitize counters and door handles and restroom facilities and all of that. And we don't feel like it is prudent or appropriate to bring employees back all at once. We feel like we need to sort of ease back into those full staffing levels and give staff time for those who haven't been in the building to acclimate to what the new normal is going to look like. So we think that between the 15th, you know, so we would keep kind of our current structure in place this week and next week, and then beginning the week of May 18th, we would look at then slowly reintroducing or making changes to those schedules, whether on staggered shifts or bringing people in, with the goal of having really everybody back in the facility by probably May 27th, 28th, toward the end of that last week of May, so that if we were to look at opening to the public on June 1st as recommended, that again, our employees have had an opportunity to be here, to be comfortable, to make sure that if we need to make any additional adjustments to workstations or work areas to accomplish appropriate social distancing, that can be done. And then one thing that I would just ask you to, Emily, if you can scroll down in the matrix. So as a part of that sort of re-entry and reintroduction into the workplace, one of the things in the matrix talked about protective measures. So it'll be the last row. So we're evaluating. We have protective barriers in several places throughout the building where we have interaction, particularly with the public. We're looking at a few other locations where protective barriers might be reasonable or desirable between employee work areas. So we'll be working to potentially install those. And then we're really looking at developing a policy for masks for our employees. We feel like it's important to be very clear and again, it's going to be a culture shift for us, just like it is a culture shift for everyone else out there in dealing with a world of wearing masks. But in order to continue to protect and preserve the health and safety, both of the public and particularly of our employees, we feel like the strategy that we've laid out here, which is we want to encourage an employee, our employees, that at any time that they want to wear a mask, they are encouraged and able to do so. There is no time when we're going to tell someone, if you prefer to wear a mask, you shouldn't do that. We're asking employees, we're encouraging employees to wear a mask anytime they are outside of their immediate work area. So if I'm in my office sitting at my desk, I could choose not to wear my mask. If I get up and move around the building, you know, I probably need to be putting on my mask. We are going to require employees to wear a mask when they enter a different city department. So one of the things that we've done as our city facilities have been closed and our staffing levels have been reduced, I've been in the office just about every day. I have not been downstairs in our police department physically for 6 weeks. I have not been in the public works facility. I have not been in the community center. So one of the things that we are going to do is require that if and when an employee needs to transition between departments, they are going to be required to wear a mask. We're also encouraging people to rethink the way that they interact with one another. Phone, email, you know, while we're all often accustomed in the building to get up and walk, you know, down the hall or across the building or downstairs to interact, continuing to do a lot of that virtually or via phone or email is going to be encouraged. We're going to require employees to wear a mask if they're assisting the public. If there is no physical barrier, i.e. glass or plexiglass window, and when working in close contact with anyone indoors. There's sometimes that you just can't avoid being, you know, closer than 6 feet with a coworker. But we're limiting that amount of time, and masks should be on. Police department employees, we issued a general order to the police department relative to masks, and it's slightly different based on their activities on the street, but they again must wear their mask when in City Hall, the community center, or follow that directive when coming to other facilities. Same thing for Public Works and Parks and Recreation. We still have, I think, some mask protocols and issues and recommendations that we're working through as it relates particularly to reopening at some point of the community center. And for our Public Works employees, again, if they want to wear a mask while they're working outside, they're welcome to do so. But if they're able to socially distance and they're not around others, I think we're not going to require that at this point. We are not looking, at least with the exception of potentially municipal court, about requiring a member of the public to put on a mask when they come into our building. We felt it was easier easier to communicate and manage to ask our employees to do that. And quite frankly, with the exception of court, the traffic and just the public coming into City Hall on a daily basis is extremely limited. There are very, very few people that come in. And we are going to continue to encourage some of the things related to permitting activity and things like that, where we have had more walk-in traffic. People have transitioned to doing that online or over the phone. And we will continue to promote and encourage that to keep the traffic low. We will be, we have placed an order and we will be providing our employees, each employee full and part-time, with masks so that they won't have to go find their own masks. And these will be reusable, washable. We have been slowly but surely procuring single-use masks as well in anticipation of needing to require those you know, in the near or long term for things like municipal court. So let me stop there and see if anybody has any questions about City Hall, Public Works, Police Department, and the transitioning of staff coming back.
I have a question. How are we dealing with the court cases? Like people who get tickets and people who are required to be in court, are we doing a down the road type scenario, or how are we handling court cases?
We basically have continued or postponed or rescheduled any docket that we've had since March 13th. And so anyone who was scheduled to be on a docket or has been scheduled to be on a docket since that time has been contacted and has been advised of that continuance and that rescheduled date. As the stay-at-home orders and things have continued, excuse me, the judge has been working pretty aggressively with the court staff and the prosecutors to think about how we reduce docket size, how we, you know, going forward deal with what will be a little bit of a backlog for these cases that we have postponed, as well as managing municipal court going forward. There are some courts in Johnson County and the metro area who are going to be doing court via Zoom.
Really?
We aren't there from a technology standpoint. We don't feel like to be able to support that initially. That may be something that as they try it and work out some of the kinks, we might be able to get there if we continue. But I think that you know, the judge is really looking at some call-in dockets over the phone, scheduling some time with the prosecutors, and really looking at trying to manage all of that. In fact, he just stopped by this afternoon, and we're continuing to look at that. I think we are not recommending, right now, we don't have any in-person court dockets set until, I believe, June 9th is the first one that we would have. And part of this is trying to figure out, can we get something to a manageable size, and then figure out how we socially distance people or how we manage it going forward, because we think that, you know, maintaining social distancing requirements and keeping docket sizes more manageable and more spread out is not going to be just through a, you know, June and July and August situation. I think this is going to carry, you know, well on into the fall and the winter. So the soonest that we would look at bringing, you know, court back, I know in talking with some of the other cities, others are looking at July 1st as in-person court days. Some are looking at June and some are looking at July. There's nobody that is looking at bringing court back any sooner than the first part of June.
Thank you.
Hillary, I had a couple questions.
Sure.
Yeah, so my first question or comment was about the employee mask policy. And I was wondering if it might be confusing to have like 4 different rules for employees rather than just requiring them at all times. And also from a supply standpoint, you know, every time you take off the mask, you're not supposed to use that same mask again. So if employees are taking it off multiple times a day, are they going to have, you know, a stockpile of masks provided to them, or how is that going to work?
Well, we are going to provide multiple. I mean, we've talked about 2 or 3. Many of our employees have their own. We haven't provided them yet. And so those of us who are here, for example, have our own kind of stash that we rotate through. We've got some that, you know, some that are available. We have talked about, you know, we've really talked up and down all sides of the mask issue. And again, that's something we kind of revisit almost every day as an incident command team. I don't think it's confusing. I think it has the potential. If we were a much larger organization, it would be much more difficult to manage it. I think in part because of our size, and in part because of the communication that we've maintained. I think managing when you should and when you shouldn't, or when you're required and when you're not required, is not something that's unreasonable for us to kind of think about.
That makes sense. Okay. My other question was about court. I don't know if you were going to say more on court or if we were moving to.
You go ahead. I don't have a whole lot more to say. I think I've probably said everything I was going to say on court.
My question, I guess it's sort of more of a comment. It would seem to me, especially if it's what a lot of other cities are considering, that a July date to more align with other in-person meetings would make sense to me. Just from a public safety perspective, I don't see why it would be safer for people to come to court than other public meetings. And I also think from a social justice perspective of talking about people having to pay fines, et cetera, waiting till July gives people a little more time to try to get back on their feet, that sort of thing.
Sure. I think part of our thought process, and I think we could certainly go either way, the biggest thing is just making a decision and then being able to communicate it, both to the officers in terms of, as you are issuing a citation, what court docket are you scheduling, scheduling someone to, and then managing that communication. So I think, moving to a July is not unreasonable. I think from the public, at least in our minds, sort of the differentiation to a certain extent between city meetings and in-person court dates. At some point, we're going to have to resume in-person court. And testing that, in some respects, we struggled a little bit with putting it even in an earlier phase where the gathering limits could potentially, you could kind of rely on that, although your gathering limits don't necessarily apply to your governmental functions all the time. But part of it is, yes, and people in court are going to come, and they're going to be here for more of an extended period of time. But we wanted to see if we could establish some smaller size dockets in June, if we could test some things like almost going to more of an appointment based. So your time to show up in court is not everyone show up for kind of the mass call starting at 6 p.m. But you would have a more structured and more specific time that we would be doing more in terms of Fairway, for example, is going to propose a 1 in, 1 out. Now their court dockets are much smaller than ours, but they, and we have talked about, how do you limit that? We would remove chairs in the courtroom. We would remove chairs in the lobby. We would mark floors as appropriate. So part of this is having the ability to test those processes and procedures before we feel like we have to open it up a little bit more widely. So can we do that with a smaller group? The city meeting's not resuming until July. I think our thought process on that was really twofold. We've had success, I think, with, and we're comfortable with, as both council in our committee meetings and our legislative meetings, as our boards and commissions have had these virtual Zoom meetings under their belt. I think we've been able to conduct business successfully, virtually and safely. We are struggling with, if you've seen reports. So for example, I think the city of Overland Park is going in and installing plexiglass in between each seat at their council dais. So that you're gonna have your own little cubicle when you come back and sit down at a council dais. We look at our, we've looked at our council chambers. I don't think putting plexiglass in necessarily makes sense. We think we could tier you and put, some up at the dais and another tier at tables at front down on the floor to create that distance, but would like to spread that out. And then obviously we would limit the number of seats in a particular room. But also because for whether it's our council committee meetings or legislative meetings or board and commission meetings, you're there for a longer period of time, right? So your exposure and the time that you're spending with people is longer. And so those were really kind of the drivers, as opposed to, you know, at some point we've trying to stay generally in line with others in the metro and keep all of those things in consideration. But I don't think it would be a, you know, a big deal.
I would just ask to consider maybe moving court to July with the same things you've said about experimentation. I think it's a good idea, and, you know, limiting capacity, having set times for folks to show up. But, you know, I think the safer we can be on that, the better, and also the giving people a little more time to sort of have their life back in order to some extent. But others might disagree, but that's just my thought on that.
I agree with Sollie on that. I mean, to me, it makes sense if we're holding off till July to figure things out. It makes sense to allow the public the same opportunity to do the same. And I'm just going to let everyone know that because we're screen sharing, I don't get to see everyone's windows quite as much. So if you have something you want to say, I'm talking to council members particularly right now, just regarding this item, please go ahead and just make a comment that you want to talk. And by comment, I mean a verbal comment, because I just can't see everyone all at once. And as a reminder to the public, we're going through item by item. So right now we are discussing items related to COVID-19 reopening, about staffing and our various facilities. So right now we're talking about council discussion items, and we'll bring it to public comment surrounding this topic here in just a minute. I hope that's clear to everyone. I don't know if I explained that well.
And I would go back and say, I don't have, and you know, not every city has presented to their councils their reopening recommendations. I am in conversation, particularly with the other cities here in Northeast Johnson County, you know, once a week, if not twice or 3 times a week. So I have a pretty good sense of what, you know, others are doing. I don't feel I can share everybody's first, but I will tell you that in terms of that June 1st reopening of city facilities to the public, as I mentioned, there are many cities that never closed their city hall facility entirely. So they're still open and they're going to continue to open. I just saw something during our Finance and Admin Committee meeting that the county offices are starting to open up more widely on May 13th. So just a couple of days after that. And we are, in terms of the other Northeast cities and the recommendations that either have been made or will be made, there are some that are opening as soon as next Monday when the stay-at-home order lifts, and others that are, you know, we are towards the end with a June 1st date in terms of reopening City Hall is what I would say. How we relate there to other City Hall and other public facilities. Just to kind of wrap up this category, we don't have a lot of non-essential events in city facilities, but things like we just want, again, to be able to clearly communicate to the public and to our employees. So no tours of our facilities. If somebody retires or leaves us, you know, typically we would have some sort of internal celebration. We're not going to do those kinds of things. Those are non-essential events in our facilities. So we won't be having those at least through the conclusion of phase 3 of the recovery reopening plan. And then looking at the Mission Market is lumped into this category. The Mission Market was scheduled to begin on June 4th. And we would look at phase 3, a phase 3 opening and I'll let Emily elaborate on that a little bit, but essentially I think we're looking at modifications to the market for the entirety of the 2020 market season. But Emily, if there's some additional information you want to share about market impacts.
Sure. So as you know, some of the markets in the metro are operating now. We were fortunate that we had our later season start time planned anyway to begin no sooner than that June 4th date. So we had that advantage. We visited markets around and watched how they are doing things, and feel like there are several iterations. Our market is different because we really emphasize gathering and lingering, and that doesn't feel like the right idea. So we've walked the site, we've talked about it. Our vendors are expressing, we've surveyed our vendors, and we're receiving overwhelming support for whatever we can provide for them this season. And also, at least at this point, really, really strong interest from a high number of vendors. So a little bit surprised there, but really encouraged. And what we want to try to do is honor those relationships that we've built and to try to support them as small business people as well, if we feel like we can do it safely. So what we're proposing is that we're comfortable waiting for phase 4 whenever it should come to do on-site shopping. So browsing, looking for things, choosing them. We could still have really pretty strict guidelines in place at that time: increased hand washing, masks encouraged, one-way shopping through the line, spaced out tents, one shopper per family, for example, all the things that we're seeing other markets implement. We think at no time would it really be the right thing. We believe at this point to have music or things that would encourage, especially families and kids, and play, all the things that we love, food trucks, that kind of thing. Eating and lingering at the site would be discouraged, but we still want to kind of test the model to see how much business support we can push to the vendors. So that would be our phase 4 recommendation. Prior to that, what we were proposing is that we could do a virtual market, basically, where we each week send out our regular emails and text reminders, just like we would normally do, with highlighting the online shopping that can be done with each of the vendors. So it would be pre-order only, and then we would have some type of safe and controlled pickup at the market in a kind of reconfigured setting. And we can go into more detail, but sort of a virtual market, and just kind of try to provide that support and exposure and promotion for all of the vendors who have stuck with us for pre-order shopping online, and then a pickup at our market space. Potentially really leaning on the Outlook parking lot, and for some coming and going that's safe and not on Johnson Drive proper. So we've looked at that and feel pretty confident about that. I did want to kind of propose to Laura and everyone, really, I didn't know if that could begin, if we felt comfortable with that model of an online market beginning June 4th, or if we wanted it to have to wait until phase 3. So similar to the city facilities, it would be June 4th at the latest, so that we could plan for that beginning for each of the weeks in June, or if you didn't feel comfortable with that.
This is Ken Davis. I think that if you could manage the online shopping June 4th, that would be great. It would at least start to get people interested in it. Mm-hmm. And if it could be done in a feasible manner, I certainly would support that.
Yeah, this is Sollie. I would view it just the same as any other takeout that's been, allowed all along. If we think staff can manage it and it can be handled safely in terms of numbers.
I agree. I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Trent. I agree too.
We really wanted to emphasize continuity, and show up in some fashion right when people thought we would be there, and try to honor that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions about public facilities, public meetings, getting employees back to work, or are we ready to move on to Parks and Recreation facilities?
Laura, I have one more question, and I'm not sure which category it would fall into, but this seems the most relevant, and mainly because you already touched on it a little bit. But could you just share a little bit more about the staff conversation and the decision not to recommend members of the public entering public facilities wearing masks?
I think that, certainly in materials that we put out, whether that's via social media or on our website, I think that encouraging people when they come to visit us. So if I'm coming in to, drop off my community rebate application form and supporting documents to neighborhood services, or if I'm coming in to get a building permit, that we would encourage people to do that. I think at least initially part of that is if we're going to require it, then we feel like we would need to potentially supply that, and how much of a supply can we build up, and particularly for people who, as they're coming in, there's really, I think, the opportunity to deal with any of that public interaction, both downstairs in police records or court, or the court, or upstairs with that window, to do that with a physical barrier in place that could provide that protection. And we just have so few, again, with the exception of court. And I think court's been the main area where we've talked about making it mandatory that you wear a mask. Again, in part because the numbers are greater. Even if you have a reduced docket size, you're here for a longer period of time. And we would look at then potentially supplying a single-use mask to those court, patrons. I mean, we could put a sign. I mean, part of the challenge is we don't, without a receptionist that's in the lobby, somebody gets through the front door. I mean, people ignore our signs. Unless we lock the doors, people are already in the building before somebody could grab them and say, you can't come in without wearing your mask. So unless we wanted to sort of assign a door monitor, I think that's been part of the other conversation, is that you could just you could get in the building and get someplace without somebody stopping you. And then we've sort of had that exposure.
I do think requiring for court might make sense, because you could also put it in the instructions for appearing.
Correct. You can, yeah. So that has been kind of our rationales. We think we can provide that. I would love it. I would love if everybody, that came into our building could do so wearing a mask, I think. But again, I mean, I think and so what we've talked about, for example, so, there are instances where someone comes into the police department where someone has to go out and, assist them, whether it's fingerprinting or taking a walk-in report or something like that. I think in those instances, we're talking about, definitely the employee would be required to put on the mask. We could certainly offer a mask to, the member of the public in that situation as well, potentially. Again, it's a little bit of a supply and demand question. And then just a physical management because of the way our building is laid out.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on. I'm back in the memo. Next is the Mission Family Aquatic Center, which has been an incredibly hot topic all along, and particularly of interest and at the top of everybody's conversation list. I think most of you probably saw that both the cities of Prairie Village and Roland Park voted on Monday to not open their outdoor aquatic facilities for the 2020 season. I know that Fairway is taking forward a recommendation. It will be the recommendation of the city of Fairway not to open their aquatic facility for this season. Overland Park committee was meeting tonight. I don't know what they've decided because I haven't logged on to their meeting, but they were making a recommendation in Overland Park. They had two options that they were presenting to their council committee tonight: open nothing or open one. From what we've heard in terms of some of the other larger cities with multiple facilities, nobody is trying to open all of their aquatic facilities. If they are looking to open, they are looking to open a single, make a single facility available. So everybody's sort of working through those processes and trying to evaluate. And we've been absolutely in close contact, particularly here in the Northeast, feeling like being able to have a consistent approach and have a consistent message was going to be, although, disappointing and frustrating for some, would be the easiest thing to communicate. And there are just some real challenges as we've looked at, and you'll see in a couple of these areas as it relates to Parks and Recreation. Internally with City Hall functions, court is where we still have a lot of things and things to explore and work out. Pools, as we looked at it, whether it's trying to maintain the social distancing requirements, whether it is, both on pool decks and within concession areas, locker rooms, guard break room areas. We think that's very challenging. Challenges in just enforcing gathering limits, and the high likelihood that has the potential to create conflict. So if you open and you have to maintain social distancing and a variety of other things, your guards are now, I equate it to they're gonna be blowing their whistles nonstop, just trying to manage people's behavior. Part of the other challenge that we're finding, and many of the other cities are encountering, is challenges in getting lifeguards certified, because part of their certification and training process is hands-on, which is very difficult to accomplish in this environment. I will tell you that in addition to that, for us in particular, for whatever reason, and I think we've mentioned this on other calls, we've had some difficulty in recruiting guards. We had put out ads and we were recruiting in the event that we thought that opening the facility would make sense. We've had difficulty in securing even enough interest in lifeguard positions that we don't feel like we would be able at some point to open both an indoor pool and an outdoor pool in this season. So we would have to, in our circumstance, even look at some sort of staggered schedule or closure of one while the other was open or something. That's a little bit unique to us. Not everybody has had that, that issue. Part of our, again, efforts were to coordinate in Northeast Johnson counties so that if one pool was open, the concern was that pool would be overburdened with people seeking that, that opportunity, and then we would just sort of be adding to the enforcement challenges of another community. And then we wanted to be able to sort of make that decision early to allow any seasonal staff that have applied or have expressed an interest in guarding at the outdoor aquatic facility the chance to seek another employment opportunity. Obviously, we understand that this decision has a significant impact on the Mission Marlin swim team. They've seen their membership grow to over 300 plus swimmers. They're an incredible community asset and resource for us. And I think I forwarded to the council an email that we received from their head coach, Alyssa Ruffin, earlier today, just offering support of whatever decision the city made, but asking for consideration of opening up for at least some portion of the swim season. Now, the MoCan Swim League, which is the league that the Marlins are in, has not made a league-wide decision as we understand it. Johnson County Swim and Dive last week canceled their season, so effectively there are other swim and dive leagues throughout the metro that have made the decisions as a league not to offer that. So I think we're looking at, there are a lot of things in addition to all of those things going on with the social distancing and the difficulty in managing the pool, I think we would also be looking at the potential for the youth sports limitation and the state's reopening plan to take effect. I don't have that right in front of me, and I don't have it all committed to memory, but I believe it's phase 2 or maybe phase 3. Youth sports can resume. Again, the soonest that would be June 1st. You know, so we've looked at, and we have weighed every alternative. Do you weigh it? And initially, I mean, even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think most of us, from a city perspective across the metro, were saying, okay, it's a little bit of a cat and mouse. You know, do we wait? What happens if we think we could realistically be open by July 1st? Is that enough of a swim season to make a difference? When we also then look at the challenges that I've sort of identified, and then I also look at budgetary considerations. And so I think in the information that I shared with you, I didn't print myself a copy, but let me find it. When I look at when we look at just the financial implications, we subsidize, and I think we all know we subsidize the operation of the outdoor aquatic center. So in the 2020 budget that was approved, we were anticipating revenues of about $147,000 for the 2020 season, with expenses totaling $268,000. So a decision to not open the facility at all for this season results in an immediate, you know, positive impact on the budget of $121,000. So I think, again, in weighing all of those factors, although it is one of the most difficult decisions, I think, and recommendations that we've come to, our recommendation would be to close our outdoor, or not open the outdoor aquatic facility for the 2020 season. We've had some conversation about exploring the potential for opening the spray ground later in the season if the situation would allow for that. But that's kind of where we are on the MFAC. So I'll stop there and see if there's any other questions.
So let's begin by allowing some council questions and conversations, as I'm sure we might have some questions or comments from members of the public. So let's start with the discussion with council and then open up for questions from the public surrounding this topic. I apologize, Ken, I think you were going to say something.
Yes, thank you very much, Council Member. As I think about this and as I've listened to you, Laura, I think that this is a very reasoned approach. I know it's a difficult decision, but I personally would support the decision. I think that it does make sense under the circumstances, and especially with other pools closing, I think it would concentrate attendance and make it even a more difficult situation for us. And so I would, at this point, support your decision.
Yeah.
Councilmember Flora.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think especially given the typical staffing of the aquatic center, that you're essentially asking children to control children in this situation, you know, with respect to limits on gathering size and social distancing, and you're setting up children, you know, underage folks who are staff to also potentially have conflicts with adults who would be, you know, potentially upset with some of these rules. And I think given that and given the other staffing challenges you've outlined, that it sucks, but it makes sense to keep it closed.
Councilmember Rothrock, do you have a comment? It looks like you unmuted yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'm on board with this. Me and my kids, we go to the pool almost every single day, and I still think that safety comes first, and it's a tough decision, but I completely agree. And I support it.
Yeah.
Yep. Trent?
Yeah, unfortunately, despite trying to find any way to keep this to keep it open, I don't see how we can, considering the the challenges that everyone laid out. And I have really fond memories of the pool too, and I'm really going to be disappointed that it's not open. But I do think we have a responsibility to keep the public safe, and that's ultimately what this comes down to. So,
Do we have any other council members with comments for or questions for Laura? Laura, I have, you know, I've been trying to wrap my mind around this, and I can appreciate the staffing concerns and appreciate the positive financial impact, surprisingly, of this, but I'm still just having a hard time, you know, and I know we haven't gotten to the community center piece, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around opening the community center, even in a limited fashion at the beginning of June, and closing the pool in its entirety. And those two concepts are very conflicting to me. And so, you know, I know that we'll get to that portion later, but that's a part that I'm really having a hard time understanding and, you know, being able to, you know, full swing, feel good about the pool piece, because to the public, you know, how can we open the community center, potentially open the community center pool, and yet leave the outdoor pool alone? So that's one concern for me. And then the other part is more of just a question of what other alternatives. I know you mentioned the splash pad area. Have we explored just potentially like by appointment lap swimming for adults only? Do we have staffing capacity for any sort of alternatives just in a very condensed version of the pool for the public? So that's what I have.
Sure, and I can address a couple of those, and I think more of those will come out when we move to the community center, so I'll try to stay focused on the pool. I mean, I think we've talked about opening up for just that, just, you know, just lap swimming. Part of, I think, what the challenge that we would face, and this is something that I think is a sentiment that's shared across at least the Northeast, if there's water in that pool, the pressure, I mean, you end up then serving a specialized user group, right? And so if there's water in that pool, the pressure that you all will have and that we as a city will have to open it up. Well, if lap swimmers can come in, why can't, you know, XYZ come in and do that? So, I mean, we've talked about, you know, do you look at just the leisure pool, which is the zero depth entry, and not put water in the competition pool? That would, you know, things that would limit the size. But again, then you go back to part of that is, you know, managing entrance and exits out of the locker room and capacity in the locker room and the guards. I mean, the pools are just guard rooms in a pool. If you've ever been in the guard room in a pool, there's no ability to socially distance for, you know, for those kids that we've asked. So I think we've explored a lot of those options. We don't have a lot because there aren't, you know, other sections of our pool that we could, you know, that we could open up. And again, I think it comes down to that, you know, if there's just a tremendous amount of pressure if you put water in the pools. Now I will tell you, so that's, I think, part of what the city of Merriam is going to struggle with, because they're going to have to fill their pool as a part of an acceptance of the new project, because they have to fill it and get the chemicals balanced before they can take it over. And so they're really struggling with, then what, you know, what does that look like for their season if the pool is going to have water in it? So I appreciate and understand those concerns, and I think we can, you know, maybe make some distinctions as we talk about the community center as well. But part of it, honestly, I will tell you, is that I think we're going to have our hands full from a staff perspective, whether that's the staff on the ground in terms of lifeguards or others in the facility, or the leadership, the supervisors, our full-time staff, just trying to figure out how to get all the other aspects of our world, you know, back open, and what's the right timing and how to do that. And so where we have opportunities where it makes sense for other reasons, we certainly didn't make a recommendation based on we can't handle it. We can't figure out, we can't figure out a plan. But looking at where there were other reasons where either not opening or a closure made or cancellation made sense, that was certainly one of the factors, because there are areas that we want to, rather than stretching ourselves too thin. And it is, I think that I would speak for pretty much everybody on the leadership team that it's been an exhausting process up to this point, and I don't think it's going to get any better in the near future. And so trying to be a little bit respectful of that and making sure that we don't stretch ourselves too thin and then lose sight of some of those, objectives and become more relaxed because we've got too many, sort of plates spinning in the air, has certainly been at least part of the conversations that we've had.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any council member comments or questions for Laura?
Well, just to add on to that, I think that the staffing concerns with the outdoor pool are definitely something that I was thinking about a lot with this whole thing. When you got temporary staff and to the comments about having to get people trained up and lifeguard certifications done and those kinds of things, I don't really see, and it's not a fun decision to make or a popular decision to make, but I don't really see a feasible way where we can expect to operate the outdoor pool. And I mean, I think to her point, the best thing to do is to just close it down entirely and not have some of those other problems that could arise if we tried to have temporary openings or partial openings for certain functions. So not a fun decision by any means, but I just think it's what we have to do for public health and safety reasons. Got to work through it.
Okay, thank you, Nick. All right, so if we have any members of the public who have any comments, this would be an opportunity for you to use the chat feature so you can type your comment there and we can read it aloud, and if we need clarification, we can call on you. This would be an opportunity to do that. It looks like we have a comment from Andy Sandler, a familiar visitor, usually in person. Hi all, respectfully, in the grand scheme of things, the sacrifices we have made over these weeks have been minor. I'll gladly debate anyone on that with the well-grounded historical perspective of a cranky old boomer. Erring on the side of caution in this case is not erring at all. I am in favor of emulating Prairie Village's proposed mask law citywide for all people, cumbersome though it may be to some. I also favor keeping PAL and the Aquatic Center closed for reasons previously mentioned. The online market idea is a fine one, but I favor resuming brick and mortar face-to-face city business later than the current phases stipulate. I understand there are people who are frustrated and beyond frustrated, but I'd rather see them frustrated than see them physically suffer. We're in better shape as a state because we've taken a sensible, deliberate approach based on public health best practices, and arbitrarily letting down our guard would be a dangerous step backward. Thank you, Andy. I think all of us would echo those sentiments. Councilmember Flora? Oh, okay. I apologize. Oh, Sollie, you are on mute.
I was touching something on my screen, so, but thank you, Andy, for those comments, and I think there'll be further discussion of what's appropriate for the community center. So stay tuned.
Yes, thank you. And I agree. I'd just like to see the consistency. If, we're going all in with the pool, I really would like to see consistency around the community center as well, which I know we're going to get to soon. Any other comments from the public that you would like discussed or shared with the council? Okay, we'll move ahead and I'll keep an eye if there's anything else that comes in. Laura, do we want to move on to the next item?
Sure. These are a little bit out of order. We've touched on a couple of them, but Mission Summer Camp. Obviously, I think this is, as you all know, for many years we have run a very successful, very well attended licensed daycare, day camp program through the community center, averaging somewhere between 165 and 185 children in the facility every single day for sometimes 9, sometimes 10 weeks, depending on how the school year played out. Recognizing that childcare is a tremendous issue for many through this period of time, again, we approach this similar to the pool. Can we do it? Can we do it safely for the attendees? Can we do it safely for our staff? And can we provide that? And in doing so, can we provide the same quality of experience that we've had? The state's recovery and reopening plan would allow for licensed day camp facilities and to be open. It is our recommendation to not offer the Mission Summer Program in 2020. We don't believe that we can meet all of those objectives, and we think that if there's any opportunity to start to reopen any portion of the community center, that will be dramatically limited by just the sheer numbers that we would have. I think many of the challenges that we see, again, stem around maintaining the social distancing. You know, you're not going to be able to take the children on the same kinds of field trips. A big part of that experience is going to the outdoor pool if they're not able to do that. So I think this was, again, when we look at the financial implications and the budgetary impacts there, this is one of the programs where we actually make money every year. And so we're estimating that based on our revenue estimates of $230,000 and our expense estimates for 2020 of $131,000, we're actually losing $140,000 by not doing this. But if any of you have you know, been in the community center over the summer when we're running that day camp program, I think you understand and reach the conclusion pretty quickly, but that's, if we think the pool presents challenges, that summer camp program presents tenfold the challenges that we have at the outdoor pool. So our recommendation is not to offer that. Again, difficult decision. We have staff members that return year after year for us. We have families that have been with us for many, many years. And we, you know, feel like we need to get that message out as quickly as possible so that people have an opportunity to make alternative arrangements if they had been planning on our summer camp program.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for Laura surrounding the summer camp program? Council members?
No, I agree with Laura. I think we proceed. This is so different than anything before. We don't want to harm anybody and we don't want people upset, but it's such a different scenario than we've ever experienced before. We just can't take chances. You just can't take chances with the human population. It's not fair to them.
Okay, anything else from council? This is now going to be the opportunity for members of the public to use the chat feature. If you have any comments, feel free to use that. I'll keep an eye on it if anything comes in. Laura, do we want to move on to?
Yeah, we can certainly move on. I'll move on to, I'm going to skip over in the memo. I'm going to keep going with the community center.
Laura, can you pause really quick? It looks
Yes.
like a comment just came in from Melissa
Yes.
Ruffin. Is there a vote following these proposals, or are they simply suggestions for consideration? Alyssa, this is part of our committee meeting as we discuss these action items so that we all hopefully get consensus, ideally, before our legislative council meeting, which will be in 2 weeks. And Laura, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I might add that, so you can't take a binding vote at a committee meeting. So we're looking for that consensus, but I would suggest, and it was going to be part of my closing, that we're probably going to look at calling a special meeting, in part because we're going to need to expand our emergency declaration to make sure we can still continue to be eligible for reimbursement funding through this process. And that would likely, I mean, the way our current emergency declaration is, and we're picking it apart to make sure, but we think basically we're in good shape through probably the 15th. That's the latest date that you identified in the emergency proclamation, the last one that was approved. And so sometime next week we would have a quick virtual meeting, and at that point I would probably encourage you to, if you felt like you were ready to make decisions on all of these, so that we could just, again, move that forward and get that communicated. So that would be an opportunity. If you didn't feel like you were ready at a special meeting next week, then yes, certainly we would bring these forward in the form of a resolution and then for action at your May 20th meeting. And part of our challenge, unlike some of the other cities, even here in the Northeast, is we just have that one legislative meeting each month. And so, whereas a Prairie Village or a Roland Park can, 2 weeks later, they're going to have another meeting. We've got to get this stuff out to you and try to react and respond to it with just one legislative meeting.
So Alyssa, most likely we will be voting next week.
Well, just a question on that. Do we actually need to have a council vote to decide to not reopen anything, or is that something that could be more of an executive leadership decision? I don't know that there's any ordinance that says the pool, for example, has to be open by a certain date, or that a festival might be postponed to a certain point.
Right. I haven't asked that specific legal question. I think having the discussion, is important. Ultimately, it's a policy decision. So, do I think you need to take a formal vote? There's probably some question about that. But I think, again, it gives us the opportunity to discuss it, and it gives us the opportunity to really communicate it publicly, and kind of have that opportunity to be together as an entire, city and community, if you will.
Sure. And I'm not trying to pass that off or anything. I'm just from more of a timing standpoint, if there's any of these decisions to be made before we were able to get to a formal vote, I was just kind of wondering if it even necessarily requires that.
Well, I think we would certainly, based on, conversations that we've had, at least around some of the things so far, I think, we could certainly start to telegraph to other user groups and things. I think there would be that comfort level that, we could start to share that information. I assume that there will be, and, we've already identified a couple of areas where we may want some additional conversation and discussion around that, and there may be some more as we get through the rest of this, but yeah, absolutely. So if everybody's ready, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the community center. Well, I'll keep going through the memo, so if people are following along in the packet. So Mission Market, we've already talked about. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Alyssa did have another comment that she put in the chat. She basically was only asking so that she could better understand for tomorrow's MOCAN meeting what our situation.
Yes, and I know we had received a survey, I think last week from MOCAN, which we had not yet returned because we didn't feel comfortable responding to all of those questions without being able to have the conversation with you all. And quite frankly, the survey came before any decision coming out of the governor's office or the Board of County Commissioners. So it was very difficult to sort of be guessing about, where people would land and where things would fall in those various phases. Okay, so Mission Market, we've touched on. Playgrounds and park restrooms. There's a conflict in the memo and the matrix. So it just shows you how fluid everything was, because it changed between yesterday morning and when I sent it to you last night. Our intent is to have playgrounds closed through phase 3, which is what the memo says. The matrix says phase 2. So I will update the matrix if everyone is comfortable with that.
Laura, by through phase 3, do you mean not opening until phase 4 or
Correct.
opening?
No.
So opening no sooner than June 15th?
Yes. Now the question there is, I think certainly phase 2 doesn't make any sense. There are some cities that most of the cities in the Northeast that I've talked to are looking at either a phase 3 or a phase 4 opening for their playgrounds. So we would be fairly consistent with that. I think remained, you could go back and forth there a little bit. If you look at gathering limit size in phase 3 of up to 90, we don't have situations where we have 90 people at a time on our play structures. Opening in phase 2 where you have a gathering limit of 30, you could find yourself in a situation where you were, getting close to or potentially exceeding those numbers. So I think there's some flexibility there, and obviously you can see we've gone back and forth internally because we have it different in 2 different places. So
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Are these phases contingent upon the numbers going down? I mean, what if the numbers start going up? Are we going to change our ideology about the phases and enter?
Well, we can't. No, I mean, so what will happen is if the numbers don't trend downward, we won't move into the next phase until we have accomplished that trend. So the dates that are laid out are the soonest that it could happen. I think, I listened to the governor's press conference today. I don't think there's any chance we're going to be moving into phase 2 on May 18th, based on the way the numbers look. But so those are best case scenario. They could absolutely stretch out longer if the numbers don't trend downward.
Thank you.
For that 14-day period. And then we're, I think, recommending that we just leave the restrooms closed. So both permanent and portable, we're having difficulty getting the portable restrooms serviced. So keeping those clean. And then I think just, we generally have vandalism issues with Broadmoor Park restrooms to begin with. And I think it's easier just to leave the restrooms closed. And then when we get to phase 4, phase out, whenever that is, to start thinking about opening up those facilities. But I didn't know if the council has a strong preference, phase 3 or phase 4 with playground equipment.
I think phase 4 makes sense.
I think I agree. I think the utility of playground equipment, just you can't use it without touching it. And I don't imagine many kids, being super cautious because they're kids. So I would say 4.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, so let's move on to the community center. And we're going to tackle the community center in kind of 2 phases because we obviously have 2 sides of that coin. So we have the community center as gym and fitness center, and we have community center as rental facility. I'm going to start with a rental facility because that's the easier conversation to have. As we've looked at our typical reservations and the reservations that we've had on the books over the next several months, until we reached the gathering limit of 90, trying to open back up for rentals just didn't seem to make sense. Most of our group sizes would be over 30, and so even trying to look at opening for rental purposes in phase 2 was very difficult to accommodate. So we're looking at reopening to rentals in phase 3 based on gathering limits of no groups over 90. We do have some regular long-term rentals. So we have a couple of church groups that meet in the facility. And we would be working with, I think both of those, I don't remember Penn. We're still working with them to see whether they would even be allowed at the 90 limit or whether we're going to have to move to phase 4 before they would be allowed. So we're going to be evaluating rentals on a case-by-case basis starting in phase 3 to see if we can bring them back based on gathering limits. The Stroke Foundation is another long-term contract and user of the facility. Obviously, they serve what is typically a vulnerable population. The Stroke Foundation has indicated to us that they don't have any intentions of being back in our facility until at least the first part of July. And so they're sort of making decisions as well in terms of, you know, how and when they're going to come back into the facility or would feel comfortable doing so. That sort of then transitions us into the community center and gyms and fitness centers. And everybody, I think, heard all of the back and forth over the last several weeks about where gyms in particular, gyms and nail salons seem to be really hot topics in terms of which phase of anybody's recovery plan that they fell into. So initially we were looking at the recovery plan that the county had proposed, that gyms and fitness centers had been moved all the way up to a phase 1 opening. They landed in phase 2 of the state and the governor's reopening plan. So as soon as we would, you know, we're in phase 1 now, or we will be in phase 1 here by May 11th, excuse me. So at whatever point that we would be allowed with and meet the gating criteria, we could in theory move to the next phase. I'm gonna lose my train of thought after 4 hours. So somebody else may have to jump in and it'll come back to me, but I don't know. It's okay.
Are you looking at your memo?
I am. Well, that was my problem. I switched between my memo and the matrix, and it threw me off my train of thought. But so anyway, so community centers can be open in phase 2. We thought that in the event that we would even remotely meet a phase 2 by May 18th, that would be way too soon, and we are absolutely not prepared to reopen community center and any of the fitness aspects of that, kind of potentially in the first stages of phase 2. We've spent a lot of time, Penn and his staff have spent a lot of time, and I've spent time with them kind of reviewing what it would even look like if we tried to open any of the fitness components of the facility. And I'm going to let him kind of jump in and tell you about some of the modifications that, regardless of which phase we end up agreeing that we want to open in, that we're looking at, so you can kind of get a sense of what that experience might be like. So Penn, if you want to kind of jump in and explain what that would look like.
Yeah, the best part of it is trying to walk through it as an individual. What does this feel and look like? And obviously phase 1, limit of 10 people. Okay, now we've got separate entrances, distinct entrance, distinct exit. So now we're breaking up the one lobby into 2 different parts, or do we bring them in from the opposite side of the venue and just have them walk straight through, and the inconvenience of that? So that was a hot topic discussion for a while. We landed on breaking the lobby into 2 separate parts, and then dissecting the community center essentially into 6 areas that we would limit people to walk through. So now we're looking at a entrance in one door, interact with an employee, then you're walking down the lone hallway, north and south. And if you want to somehow come back or leave the facility after your workout, you're going to have to do that through the gymnasium, so that we've got essentially a one-way flow of traffic. But there's going to be a person limiting traffic on the elevator. There's someone limiting how many people can be in the locker rooms at any given time. And then an individual safeguarding the passage of members and patrons through the steps. There are a lot of nuances to just the flow of patrons. And then you jump into, okay, well, we're going to have fitness classes in the gym. How many are limited? Who's safeguarding that space? We landed on the fitness instructors kind of being the marshal of that restriction, and whether it's 10 or whether it's 30, depending on the phase, obviously including themselves on kind of that, as well as any physical therapists that may be there with the individuals who are there for fitness purposes. In terms of cardio equipment.
Let me back up really quickly. So you're anticipating though one fitness class per time slot. Is that correct? So you would be utilizing court 3 for fitness. So no fitness except one class at a time in the building.
Correct. So one fitness class that's designated in court 3. Because of social distancing elements, we feel like we can accomplish that best there. And then obviously a cleaning portion before and after, before we introduce the next fitness class. As of right now, a fair amount of instructors have opted out of anything in phase 1 or 2. So we're automatically limited to the maximum of 3 fitness classes a day from those individuals who are willing. And then obviously, depending on how many people attend, whether or not that actually is worth hosting. So we feel like we can accommodate 3 classes a day pretty easily within the 15.5 hours of opening. And then it's just a matter of flow of in and out through the gymnasium. So we've got more than one access point, so that's nice. Then we go upstairs to our cardio equipment. You may recall that it's all kind of in one secluded area, pretty close. It actually turns out that if you use every other piece of equipment that satisfies the 6-foot social distancing element, our plan was to alternate those after a brief cleaning midday so that we're not overusing any one piece of equipment too much. But every other piece of equipment, and then there's 2 rows of equipment, so the piece of equipment kitty corner from you, so that there's no one front and no one beside you at any given time. Then we've got a staff member controlling the use pattern there so that we're not overriding any distancing protocols and making sure that our patrons are cleaning, and then we're doing a follow-up cleaning in case they have missed any portions of the equipment wipe down. Plan is to utilize the track at this point. We foresee that being a sticking point because there's going to be one slow patron or one fast patron who's going to want to pass, and you can't on our track and maintain the social distancing element. So that one, I'm sure we'll modify over time, but the idea there is that if anyone shows up and we've got limitations on how much cardio equipment's available for use, that could be your staging area. You can kind of walk laps until in a couple minutes a cardio piece opens up for use. So the major areas, if we see our intended users show up all at once, we have the ability to expand into C, D, and E and potentially move some cardio equipment down to that space. We don't want to initially, just for cleaning purposes and to kind of safeguard the overall cleanliness of the facility and make sure that our touch points are kind of limited to those 6 areas.
No weight equipment.
No free weight and no selectorize initially. Phase 1, phase 2, there's a directors meeting where we'll kind of get an idea of where other cities are landing perspective wise. I know at least one other community is moving their fitness or their selectorized equipment outside of their intended use areas. And that way they're maximizing that social distancing element. And then they're just being hyper vigilant on the cleaning, which is my biggest concern because it's a rubber hand use. You're changing the weights. There's so many potential areas, and the time you're taking to clean it before and after each person, we could utilize a lot of our staffing on one piece of equipment. So it just doesn't make sense initially. And then the cycle studio, which comes right off of the south lobby, we're spreading out those bikes to get them at least 6 feet apart, limiting how many patrons can be in that space. And then the modified use new steps, which are kind of the sit down and recline cycle, we're going to move into the downstairs lounge close off that access point from the lobby and just allow access from rooms A and B into the lounge space. I believe that covers most of the spacing initially.
So just a couple of things I would add. So no basketball. So no pickup games of basketball, no use of the basketball courts other than the court 3 for a fitness class. Closure of the facility on Sunday. So basically maintaining your regular, or, you know, your existing hours Monday through Saturday, but the just general usage of the facility, even not under these circumstances on Sundays, doesn't really warrant. It makes sense for us to get staffed up, particularly if we would look at staffing to accommodate any kind of cleaning, sanitizing. All
Yeah,
those
we looked at the basketball and racquetball. That's really high touch. Once again, you're inviting people to be close proximity, touching. You can't clean a backboard realistically after every basketball game, or you know, potentially up the post. So yeah, we just ruled those out.
So I think, I mean, I think what you can see is there's just a tremendous, I mean, it would take a tremendous amount of effort to even open on a, and this would be an incredibly limited, you know, opening. Our thought was to at least try to put together a plan because this is a facility where people are purchasing memberships. Now, what we have done in this interim period is we have refunded, not refunded, we have basically suspended automatic bank drafts. And for anyone who has a membership that is paid in full, we have looked at, you know, basically carrying that over so they will remain whole. So on average, and there was some information on the budgetary impacts, when just for, you know, general thought and consideration, our average monthly revenues between memberships, day passes, classes, programs, and rentals are about $94,000. So for every month that we're closed, we can expect to lose about $94,000 worth of revenues. We've talked about and done some exploration of, I think I saw a question from Sheldon, maybe that about appointments. We've talked about that. I think one of the things we haven't done, because we wanted to get some feedback to know how to structure it, is we probably need to ask our membership, their comfort level, when they anticipate their own personal comfort about coming back in and using a fitness facility, and B, if they were to do so, what they need to have available for it to feel like it still had value for them. And I think we've talked over the last week or so about, you know, trying to get a survey out and ask some of those questions, because I think that could also help, you know, guide some of this. I will tell you that in, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, what I've heard in the last day and a half is that the latest anybody that we've talked to is proposing to open up their community center is June 1st. And I've heard some as early as May 11th, which is just amazing to me. But that's kind of the, you know, and I think there's, again, that's pushing it into a phase where, according to the plan, if you're following it, we could be open. Whether we should be open is a whole, you know, is a whole nother conversation. So I think, you know, what we tried to do is put together a recommendation that we felt like we could manage to try to get to some limited reopening by June 1st. I think before June 1st is absolutely not feasible. But then it's just that question, as we've seen, and I know some have, about whether it's reasonable. And I will just touch on the pool. So our thought right now with the indoor pool, so earlier this evening you talked about a pool deck resurfacing project. We would typically tackle that in August. Our thought is, if the council approves that in 2 weeks, we would go ahead and move forward with that project now, which means your indoor pool is going to be closed for the deck resurfacing, and we're not going to have a conversation about, you know, access to any of our pools through most of the season. But our thought was as well that if there's some opportunity to return back to water aerobics or fitness classes of some sort, or lap swimming or anything else which is more controlled in that aquatics environment, that getting the pool deck resurfacing done and having that option potentially available later in the year would provide some additional flexibility. But so in theory, if you approve the pool deck resurfacing, your pool's not even going to be available for use before, I don't know, July or August, I would think.
I think Councilmember Flora has a comment or question.
Yeah, I mean, I was really skeptical about the June 1st date. I feel a little better if June is going to look like only these things. I still think it's personally too soon, but I feel better about it now than I did just reading the materials plain. My one comment, I guess, is in the chart we have expanded use and access of the community center. I don't know if that means return to normal or what that looks like, but at June 15th. And I was thinking maybe if we were to move forward with the June 1st date with this modified use only, that it would make sense to keep it for the entire month, both for safety and so that people could make elections about membership, and if it was, you know, worth their money to have the modified use of the facility for June, and then not consider anything more than this list until at least July 1st.
Yeah, and I think our other reason in kind of lining it up with June was because it is membership driven, and people think about their memberships in terms of a month, kind of that month to month, right? So part of it was, let's pick the start of a month. Whenever we're going to do this, let's pick the start of a month, because I think it's easy from a communication standpoint. I think what we have talked about is, you know, part of why we didn't say open the pool or the community center any sooner than June 1st is we want to be able to collect some of this additional information, you know, bring it back to you. We wanted, you know, if I tried to write everything that we've even talked about and half the stuff we haven't talked about, I would still be cranking away at my computer. But there are just so many nuances. And I think, you know, if we think we're moving in that direction, we almost sort of need to get it set up that way and start to run staff through, you know, what those protocols and what those practices are.
Yeah.
And we would still
Yeah.
be, I mean, we've done some preliminary number crunching to, you know, with his 6 stations and how many staff would it take to manage all of that, that we're still going to have some, you know, conversations we'll probably need to have around staffing levels at the community center and what do you want to do. But that gives us another 30 days to kind of get to that point and evaluate what's happening with data and gating criteria and all of those kinds of things.
Right, and so that was kind of my point, was rather than the chart which suggests we go to some other plan for the community center starting mid-month, I'd recommend that if we were going to proceed on June 1st, we stick with this plan for at least the entire month of June before considering further opening it up. And that would allow people to make membership, you know, selections too, like you were talking about.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, I just got some word also tonight that Overland Park decided that they're gonna not open any of their outdoor pools this season.
Okay.
And they plan on holding off on their indoor pool and Matt Ross Community Center, at least for a little while longer until it's feasible to reopen. So they didn't sound like they had a firm date that they had landed on yet for the community center and indoor pool, but they're not opening their outdoor pools either.
Well, I'll go back and look at the minutes. They were proposing June 1st opening, so I'll see I'll go back and scour their conversation and see.
Yeah, the exact message I got said that they weren't going to open the internal or the indoor pool or the Matt Ross Community Center until it was deemed feasible.
Okay.
I don't quite know what that exactly, but
I would be curious to hear what others think of the June 1st date with this plan. But
I think with this plan, it sounds pretty good. June 1st, you know, it still gives us enough time between now and then. Also, that if things change and we have to push that back further. I mean, I think obviously any date we land on right now is a tentative thing that we can plan towards, but
Right.
if we don't have any major setbacks between now and then, I think the plan to open in a more limited fashion like that seems pretty doable.
Yeah.
Happen between now and June 1st, but
Yeah.
here.
I was just going to say that, you know, coming into tonight, I was a little skeptical of that date, just from kind of the notes and our agenda. It just seemed a little ambitious. I was really worried about basketball in particular, but I am a little bit more assuaged just kind of hearing staff talk through this. So I'm willing to give it a shot, but and just kind of keep our options open for modification if things aren't going the way we think.
I concur with everything that's been said. And I think it, again, it's a very reasoned approach, and I trust Penn to decide whether it's going to be really feasible or not to do it, and trying, doing some testing after you start to have people there. I think it'll give you a better sense of what's needed.
Yeah, every good plan has at least 10 pivots in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
we've
right.
got almost a month between now and June 1st still. I mean, more than 3 weeks anyway to
Yeah.
kind of
there's-
keep evaluating and see if any new developments come up. And I think it's a good balanced approach to trying to get something open and give people that chance to go get some recreation there, but so being as safe as we can possibly be with some of it.
Well, if there's one thing we've gotten really good at over the last 6 or 8 weeks, it's pivoting on a dime.
Well,
The
there'll
other
be
thing
more
that,
of it, I'm sure.
yes, that we didn't mention was that, and part of what we would survey on, but I think we're also talking about, do we set aside certain hours of each day for use by the more vulnerable populations, so that we are able to protect, similar to what the grocery stores and others have done. That's been part of the conversation as well. And part of that, I think we want to flesh out with the survey to just see if there's no interest from those vulnerable populations for coming back at this point, you know, we may be able to make some modifications. But that's why I think a survey of the membership with at least some idea at this point of what that might look like. It's hard to go in and say, hey, would you come back if we open up on June 1st? Well, they don't know unless we go, you know, provide some additional detail about what may or may not be available to them.
I also believe it puts Penn in kind of an awkward position in terms of staffing. I mean, you kind of keep people on hold. You want to make sure the public's taken care of. But, you know, some of these kids, if they come for the summer to work in a community center, they need to find other employment too. I mean, you just feel kind of bad all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will give us a little bit more time to refine. So what we're looking at is, what does it take to staff this modified version, and how many hours is that versus what a typical staffing plan would look like? And then we can bring that to you before you make a final decision and say, okay, you know, do we need to make adjustments to staffing, or are we going to, you know, need to look at some employee decisions, or, you know, just where are we? And again, I think the further we go, the more we have the ability to collect the data, we, you know, are able to interpret what's happening with the trends across the state, and how we think we might be able to move through the phases is going to be really helpful. It's just, and then, you know, I don't know. I think it's been a little bit unclear about how quickly or how close to the beginning of each potential new phase the state is going to cut the announcement, right? So I don't really want to be trying to respond. So we're trying to also build in some cushion again, so we have time to thoughtfully react and respond, because I don't want to listen to a press conference at, you know, 6 p.m. on Sunday night and say that the world is opening up on Monday morning at, you know, 8 a.m.
Yeah. Lauren, not to further complicate things, but my understanding, and you probably have better intel, is that the county is keeping the phases in terms of what can open, but that everything after phase 1 will be based on the county's gating criteria as to whether we're ready to move to a new phase or not. So that might be another thing to clarify.
That is not that is not our understanding, but we will certainly clarify. We have
Okay.
clarified,
That
but
was-
we'll clarify the clarification.
That was how I interpreted anyway, at least comments of one of the commissioners on social media. But
Well, Emily,
because
you
the
might,
gating criteria is community specific.
if you might pull up even just see if you can find the email that we got and read that. We got something very, very specifically today that.
Okay. Maybe they've changed.
Yeah, that we're going to follow. Once we get past May 11th, we're basically falling in line with the state and going to match up with their gating criteria.
Okay.
But I will ask that question again. That's kind of the $1 million question, right? Okay, so anything else on the community center? You know, I talked so long, I logged myself out of my notes.
We do have a comment from the public. Andy Sandler, June 1 provides a reasonable cushion to make a decision whether to move forward. I'm still skeptical that it'll be the right time to throw open the gates, though. So it sounds like he's on the same page as us.
So are we. There's plenty of skepticism to go around.
I think family picnic is next.
Yeah, family picnic. I got back.
I have the comment, sorry, the words from the county I posted in the chat.
Yeah, and it says there, unless a decision is made to be more restrictive. So I think that's what they're saying, that the county gating criteria could vary, but maybe ask for further follow-up on that.
That's
Yes,
true.
but-
This was shared with us as, this is what we're saying now. So that's,
Yes.
that's a fair point.
Sounds about right.
Yep. Okay, so Mission Summer Family Picnic, obviously along the same lines, large gatherings of people. If the market doesn't make sense, does this make sense? Right now that we would, and I think you've seen Prairie Village canceled their Village Fest. Lenexa has canceled the barbecue festival, their barbecue competition at the end of June. I mean, this is just the trend and the direction that everybody's moving in with the uncertainty, because you just need time logistically to plan for these kinds of events and to get the word out. Our recommendation at this point, and we've talked about, you know, reverse, drive up, you know, park and watch fireworks, and other cities have talked about that. But then what if somebody has to go to the bathroom, and what if you can't get people to stay in their cars, and all kinds of, again, just challenges that the management part takes some of the fun out of it. So what we believe is that would be virtually next to impossible to hold a traditional event like we've all come to know and love, with the expected gathering restrictions and guidelines in place. Because I think even though the phase 4 of the state plan doesn't include a specific gathering limit, they kind of left it to be determined. So there's really no way, even though they're saying in some of the documents, you know, the larger venues and concerts and some of those things could resume, I think there's still going to be lower gathering limits, even by the time we get to phase 4, if I were betting. So we're recommending that at this point we make a decision to postpone, well, 2 options. Either make a decision to postpone until September, recognizing that we're still going to have in September a really high potential that the whole thing would still need to be canceled in order to maintain all of these things. Or if the council would prefer to just definitively, you know, make a decision and move on, then let us know and we can focus on, you know, developing and finding other ways to kind of support virtual community gatherings or activities. From a budgetary standpoint, we generate no revenue off of that. We spent last year between staffing and supplies and fireworks a total of $13,000, so we would be saving $13,000.
Well, I really like Andy Sandler's comment here that we should just go out this year and buy all the cut rate fireworks that we can get on this year's event and save them to next year to have.
And we'll store them at your house, Nick.
Well, that's cool, whatever.
Well, I haven't read the comments. I haven't read the minutes or watched the video. I know that in Prairie Village, they were discussing a virtual part of their Village Fest, doing something virtual and then potentially like a drive-by pickup, because a lot of families count on the family picnic as, you know, a really community kind of around 4th of July, you know, that whole thing. So like a drive-through, grab like a you know, a craft kit for your kids, or drive by and pick up something. So I would love to see city staff, if you have the capacity, to explore, you know, and maybe it's wrapped into the mission market, I don't know, but explore something for families, because parents are really gonna, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but parents are really struggling to keep their kids entertained. And with the lack of summer camp, the lack of activities, the lack of community things that we are so accustomed to offering as a city, I think any opportunity we can take to give something to families, to make something special for their kids, be it if we spend, you know, $500, you know, whatever it is. So I'd propose that.
That we cancel altogether and just completely replace with something different, or that we postpone and do something different and hope we get to have the picnic?
Postpone, maybe look to do something different online and take all the money that we would have spent this year and use that for the fireworks budget for next year, in addition to whatever fireworks
Okay.
for next year.
I think that September's weather is always dicey. And so
Right.
I am kind of in favor of not just canceling it and not postponing and putting you in a position where you have to make a decision and then worry about weather in September.
Yeah, I'm with Hillary too, though. If we could do just some sort of, you know, pick up craft or candy in a way that was safe, even if it is tied into, you know, a market pickup date that we're already have staff at, rather than on the 4th, or, you know, our regular weekend after date, that might be fun. But yeah, I am good either way, delaying to September or canceling and having a double party in 2021.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying a double party, I'm saying
Double fireworks.
Double fireworks, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a double party if you
So
guys
I
want.
wouldn't be opposed to double popsicles and everything as well, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, my vote is to just cancel entirely, and I'm also for the increased celebration next year. I think the idea of having something for the families makes sense too.
Okay. Anybody else from council want to weigh in on that one? Okay. Then I think we have, I'm almost through my list. Sunflower Festival, I think most of you knew that, you know, following the 2019 festival, the Mission Business Partnership said, we don't want to do this anymore. City, would you like to take it back over? And so we have been having discussions prior COVID-19 that, you know, did we have the capacity to do that and feel like we could do that well? You know, there were still always parts of it that we were continuing to support. And I think our decision and our conclusion prior to the coronavirus was that absolutely we think we have the capacity. And so we were beginning to kind of develop kind of a structure and something to bring to you all to present. I think our recommendation at this point is let's take a break from the Sunflower Festival in 2020 and come back and have some conversations about what do we want a community event or festival to look like, and come back in 2021 and see if we can't, bless you, knock it, you know, kind of knock it out of the park. Part of the challenge was and I think we saw it this last year, so the move from August to October, which I think from just a comfort level in terms of weather and participation was a good decision, meant we had no marching bands in the parade. So we did our legwork, and if we were to have, the only time we could have marching bands in an event this year would have been kind of at that end of August, heat of the summer date. So one of the things that I think we want to have a longer conversation, and now we'll have hopefully time to do that, is, you know, is the parade an important part, and then who is it important to have in a parade to make it feel like our sort of hometown, small town parade. So our recommendation is yes, we would love to and feel like we have the capacity to do a festival, but let's let's take our time and plan a good one for 2021.
Debbie, you're still on mute.
Sorry.
Oh, nope, hit it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be possible to put some of these, the main events that the city holds over the next 6 months, to put some kind of a schedule in the next Mission magazine to let people know what we'll be doing and what we won't be doing?
Yes, if we can get there. If not, we're going to put a teaser that says, please go look at the website. Okay. Because it's going to be a little bit of a balancing act when this next one goes to print and what we may or may not have a definitive answer on. But yes, we will do our best to get that word out.
Thanks.
And then the Citizens Academy we threw on there, I think that has already been postponed / canceled just because of gathering limit sizes initially, and then many of the facilities that make that academy what it is are not going to be open to the public. And so I think the chief and the department's recommendation is we'll just cancel it and pick it back up again after the first of next year.
Okay, Laura, thank you very much. Is there anything else?
If there is, do you want to talk about the video, Emily? Okay.
Yes. We feel like we need to say hello to our public, similar as others have done, with a video boosting morale, letting people know we're still here, sharing what we've been working on in the interim. And so similar to other cities, and this is not groundbreaking material, but we thought we needed to get ourselves on the board, would be to have a script written, really brief points for everyone, and then film it quickly and get it out in the next few days. And we were kind of thinking about it with some of the department heads and key staff people overseeing different ones of the departments, but then also those of you who wanted to participate. We'll need to keep it short, but if you're interested in having a role in that, if you could just send me an email, and we'll work on figuring out a way to make it snappy and brief, but still inclusive. And then we'll get it out and shared just for our kind of COVID message from everybody so people can see faces.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's great. Glad we're doing that. Okay, so if that's everything we have surrounding this discussion item, I anticipate, Laura, you want to touch on a special council meeting for potentially next week?
Yeah, so I do think that particularly, again, in looking at the emergency declaration, and I'll have a better sense after our meeting tomorrow morning with the incident command team. Captain Madden was going to touch base with the county's emergency management director just to kind of get some clarification and make sure that we think about what the next step is with the emergency proclamation. But I do think that at a minimum, we will want to do something with respect to modifying that emergency proclamation. Again, primarily because as long as we are under that state of emergency, we have the potential to sort of track, and if there's ever any reimbursement that could be available for expenses that we've incurred, that would allow us to be able to recoup that. And so we looked at it this morning, and we really didn't even want to take a stab at what that might look like until we got through tonight's discussion. But I think that we could be in a position, even as early as, Monday. I don't know what everybody's schedules look like next week, to have a special Zoom meeting to consider that. We would have to get a meeting called, which we can, take care of potentially over the next couple of days.
Is Wednesday next week?
I don't know how does Wednesday look for everyone?
I have solid waste that night, but I might be able to do both.
Okay.
Fine by me.
Yeah.
I'm good with
Wednesday
it.
works.
Okay. Then we'll get a special meeting notice drawn up, and get some documents out, and we'll try our best to get, since it's not a rest of a normal packet, we'll see if we can't get the packet pulled together Friday. If not, we'll get it out to you Monday, so you have a couple of days to look at it. But it's just going to be revisions to the emergency proclamation, and then capturing, I think the only maybe difference that I heard was potentially looking at bringing court back from that June date until July 1st. So we can look at that, incorporating that. And then did you want to push the reopening of City Hall to the public otherwise to the July date, or were you comfortable with trying to target that June 1st date based on just not much traffic that comes through this building?
I'm okay with June 1st for City Hall.
Yeah. Councilmember Flora, do you have any insight on that? I know, partly was from your recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we move court where there's going to be the biggest number of people at once, and also people, potentially having issues with payment of fines, et cetera, then that solves the biggest part of my concern with that June date.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, I think we have the direction that we need to make some modifications to the matrix and get it cleaned up and get something back in front of you next week. So I really appreciate everyone's time and questions and thoughtfulness, and we've thought through a lot, but obviously we don't think of everything. So group think is very helpful.
I have one point of personal privilege. I just wanted to let you know that I really enjoyed spending my 25th anniversary celebration tonight with you guys.
Well, congratulations to you and Cheryl.
Congratulations, Ken.
Make it special
Thank
for you,
you.
Ken.
Happy anniversary.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 9 of our discussion items. I'm going to glaze right over that. We already talked about it in finance and administration. Unless somebody really wants to comment on chairs, we'll dig into that on May 20th. Everybody feel good about that?
Yes.
All right. And then we have department updates. Laura?
I got nothing after that.
Awesome. All right, that concludes our CDC meeting.
Well, hey, just real quick, we have 2 quick things. I wanted to throw a reminder out there on the Harvesters event this Saturday.
Oh, yes, thank you.
That'll be happening at North at 8:30 in the morning, and masks and gloves will be provided. It's just to help basically move some food around, load some stuff up into people's cars. It should be pretty contactless. Anybody that's willing to come out and volunteer. This is a time of pretty great need for a lot of people, so it'll definitely help the community. The other thing, I just wanted to say condolences to, friends and family of Officer Mosher from Overland Park, and to our colleagues in Overland Park. Give a special shout out to all the first responders. I know a lot of them are working really hard right now. They still go out there every day, put their lives on the line, literally, to keep our community safe. And it was an absolute tragedy what happened in Overland Park. And just let everyone know that we're thinking about them here too. So.
Thank you
for that.
We echo all of that, and thank you to Laura and staff for everything you guys are doing. We appreciate you and how hard you're all working. This is such a challenging time. Councilmember Flora?
Yes, I was just going to say, for anyone still left on the call from the public, we do, if you haven't gotten enough and need more counsel in your life, next Tuesday, May 12th, we will be having a Ward 4 meeting over Zoom that you can see the details up on the city calendar.
And one more comment on Nick mentioning harvesters. For anyone in the public that's interested, there's no identification required for those food drives. I just want the public to be aware of that. I think that's an important note. Well,
Yes.
we kept it under 4 hours, everybody.
Woo!
Good job. Officially brain fried, and look forward to seeing you all next week.
Okay,
Bye,
thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Our meeting. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.